very end of the book. Yesterday morning, the police cleared Zuccotti Park, but today the people are back. The police should know that this protest is not a battle for territory. We're not fighting for the right to occupy a park here or there. We're fighting for justice. Justice is not just for the people of the United States, but for everybody. What you've achieved since September 17th, when the Occupy movement began in the United States, is to introduce a new imagination, a new political language into the heart of the empire. You've reintroduced the right to dream into a system that tried to turn everybody into zombies, mesmerized into equating mindless consumerism with happiness and fulfillment. As a writer, let me tell you, this is an immense achievement. I cannot thank you enough. We are talking about justice. Today, as we speak, the Army of the United States is waging a war of occupation in Iraq and Afghanistan. U.S. drones are killing civilians in Pakistan and beyond. Tens of thousands of U.S. troops and death squads are moving into Africa. If spending trillions of dollars of your money to administer occupations in Iraq and Afghanistan is not enough, a war against Iran is being talked up. Ever since the Great Depression, the manufacture of weapons and the export of war have been key ways in which the United States has stimulated its economy. Just recently, under President Obama, the United States made a $60 billion arms deal with Saudi Arabia. It hopes to sell thousands of bunker busters to the United Arab Emirates. It has sold $5 billion worth of military aircraft to my country, India, my country, which has more poor people than all the poorest countries of Africa put together. All these wars, from the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki to Vietnam, Korea, Latin America, have claimed millions of lives. All of them fought to secure the, quote, American way of life, end quote. Today, we know that the American way of life, the model that the rest of the world is meant to aspire toward, has resulted in 400 people owning the wealth of half the population of the United States. It has meant thousands of people being turned out of their homes and jobs while the U.S. government bailed out banks and corporations. American International Group alone was given $182 billion in the bailout. The Indian government worships U.S. economic policy. As a result of 20 years of the free market economy, today 100 of India's richest people own assets equal to 1/4 of the country's GDP, while more than 80% of Indian people live on less than 50 cents a day. 250,000 farmers driven into a spiral of death have committed suicide. We call this progress and now think of ourselves as a superpower. Like you, we are well qualified. We have nuclear bombs and obscene inequality. The good news is that people have had enough and are just not going to take it anymore. The Occupy movement has joined thousands of other resistance movements all over the world in which the poorest of people are standing up and stopping the richest corporations in their tracks. Few of us dreamed that we would see it, the people of the United States on our side, trying to do this in the heart of empire. I don't know how to communicate the enormity of what this means. The 1% say we don't have demands. They don't know, perhaps, that our anger alone would be enough to destroy them. But there are some things, a few pre-revolutionary thoughts I had for us to think about together. We want to put a lid on this system that manufactures inequality. We want to put a cap on the unfettered accumulation of wealth and property by individuals as well as corporations. As capitalists and Liddites, we demand, 1, an end to cross-ownership in business. For example, weapons manufacturers cannot own TV stations. Mining corporations cannot run newspapers. Business houses cannot fund universities. Drug companies cannot control public health funds. 2, natural resources and essential infrastructure, water supply, electricity, health, and education cannot be privatized. 3, everybody must have a right to shelter, education, and health care. 4, the children of the rich cannot inherit their parents' wealth. This struggle has reawakened our imagination. Somewhere along the line, capitalism reduced the idea of justice to mean just human rights. The idea the idea of dreaming of equality became blasphemous. We're not fighting to tinker with reforming a system that needs to be replaced. As a capist and a Lidite, I salute your struggle. Salam and Zimbad Dad. That's the end of the book. This is from the very opening of it, chapter 1. Is it a house or a home? A temple to the new India or a warehouse for its ghosts? Ever since Antilla arrived in Altamont Road in Mumbai, exuding mystery and a quiet menace, things have not been the same. Here we are, the friend who took me there said. Pay your respects to our new ruler. Antilla belongs to India's richest man, Mukesh Ambani. I'd read about his about this most expensive dwelling ever built. The 27 floors, 3 helipads, 9 lifts, hanging gardens, ballrooms, weather rooms, gymnasiums, 6 floors of parking, and 600 servants. Nothing had prepared me for the vertical lawn, a soaring 27-story high wall of grass attached to a vast metal grid. The grass was dry in patches, bits have fallen off in neat rectangles. Clearly, trickle down hadn't worked. But gush up certainly has. That's why in a nation of 1.2 billion, India's 100 richest people own assets equivalent to 1/4 of the GDP. And then Arundhati goes on from there talking about how India is kind of an example of capitalism ghost story by Arundhati.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, happy Impeachment Senate trial Monday. Well, it starts actually tomorrow, and I'm not sure exactly how much of tomorrow is going to be like procedural stuff versus, actual theater. But guarantee you throughout the week, as the trial of Donald Trump in the United States Senate rolls on, you will be hearing it here on this program, at least, between noon and 3 Eastern time, 9 and noon Pacific time. So that's going on. In our second hour today, Ted Harvey is going to drop by. He's got a new organization. It's called the Committee to Defeat the President, specifically Joe Biden. No, Stop Joe is their website. This should be interesting. And in our third hour, Representative Andy Levin is going to be with us. I'm assuming it's pronounced Levin. I haven't met him. He's a Democrat from Michigan, the 9th District, member of the House Committee on Education and Labor, and also the House Foreign Affairs Committee, andylevin.house.gov. And he'll be taking your calls for the full hour. It's a brand new member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. And so we will be doing a national progressive town hall meeting Monday with Representative Levin. But first, I wanted to read to you, or share with you, my op-ed for today that I wrote over at thomhartmann.medium.com. And just tell you in advance, the punchline is the very last sentence. So just follow along with me, okay? The headline, he evaded response, and we can talk about this and how this is all going to play out and the impeachment and pretty much, broadly anything else you'd like. In fact, I want to get into also another way around the filibuster, but we'll get to that in a minute. The headline is, he evaded responsibility far longer than anybody thought possible. The subhead, for justice to prevail, even a chosen one who encouraged attacks on America must be held to account. He lied to his followers for years. He told them he was chosen by God to lead them and that they were the only true believers. Everybody else was okay with abortion, homosexuality, and was weak-kneed about the Bible's call for a vengeance that mandates the death penalty. He reveled, in fact, in his ability to use the death penalty. The right-wing preachers loved him, and he showered them with attention, bending government to shower them with wealth and power. They, in turn, told their congregants that, despite his personal failings, he was the one, the reincarnation, or at least the modern version of an ancient king who Scripture said would come to lead their people into the last days when the Messiah would return. He used race and religion as weapons, promoting scorn and hate against those unlike him and his followers. Intolerance and bigotry bound his acolytes to him. He told his followers that all the politicians were corrupt except those who had pledged loyalty to him, and encouraged them to follow a bizarre cult belief that those political leaders regularly engaged in vile acts of Satan-worshiping and perverted sexual practices. He whipped them up into a frenzy. He used everything from sophisticated online propaganda techniques to old-fashioned rallies to build their loyalty to him, their willingness to fight for him, even for some, their willingness to die for him. He was a tall, vain man who obsessed on his own appearance, demanded absolute loyalty from his third wife, who stood by him as his evil act unfolded, and his children from her and his other wives. He burned through much of his inherited real estate construction fortune, building a small empire devoted to his cult of hero worship of himself, becoming a minor media star and an outspoken advocate for cracking down on crime and criminals. He reveled in being their leader, their chosen one, the unique person who they believed could save their nation, their religion, and their way of life. He never specifically told anybody to attack U.S. landmarks in a way that was explicitly illegal. Instead, he told them they had to fight, they had to be strong, that they were the last chance to save a threatened way of life that flourished mostly in the rural parts of the country. But he left it to others to plan the actual attack. Others who lived far away, who had spent years learning the techniques and technologies of the weapons they would use. Others who actually planned the effort to decapitate the government and its institutions of power with a mighty blow that would shock the world. He surrounded himself with corrupt cronies who drew their authority and power from their close association with him and helped fill the ranks of the government he had seized at almost every level across the country with people who'd sworn fealty to him. For his followers and true believers, it seemed he was the blessed one, the Midas touch, the man who turned everything into gold. He loved and reached out to the poorly educated, knowing they were the least likely to understand the historic blasphemy he was committing against both their religion and the pro-democracy movement that was sweeping the country. When his followers finally executed the plan they had organized in secret, with funding and a wink and a nod from him, whipped into a frenzy by his oratorical skills, he refused to acknowledge responsibility for their horrific act or the people who died as a result of it. In his public statements, he feigned ignorance of the details, although reports leaked out that at the time of the attack, as people were fleeing in terror and dying, he was gleefully watching the entire thing on television from his place of safety. At first, it seemed he would escape any sort of penalty or punishment. Right after his followers pulled off the crime he'd encouraged them to commit, elected Republicans expressed outrage and blamed him by name. Over time, however, their efforts to hold him accountable became more and more feeble, and they eventually changed their mind about prosecuting him altogether. The Republican leader, in fact, said, quote, "I really just don't spend that much time on him, to be honest with you," end quote. It looked, just as with pretty much everything else in his life where he had been irresponsible and destructive, that he would get away with this one, too. After all, he hadn't taken up arms against anybody. He hadn't beaten a policeman or anybody else to death. He hadn't even participated in the planning of the attack. Eventually, however, the task fell to a Democratic politician to bring him down. Osama bin Laden was finally brought to justice by President Barack Obama on May 2nd, 2011. What do you think? Okay, yes, that was all about bin Laden, that whole article. Yes, every piece of it. Oh, my. Okay. The Republican Party, I don't know if you caught Pat Toomey on Jake Tapper's show over the weekend. Pat Toomey, who back in 2017 said, we need to pass this $1.5 trillion tax cut for billionaires and my donors over Democratic objections. We don't need any friggin' Democrats. Let's pass it by reconciliation, which is what they did. Pat Toomey, who was like a spokesman for that, was on TV saying, not only should we not pass the $1.9 trillion emergency COVID relief package, not only should we not pass it, we shouldn't even pass the $600 billion Republican compromise that Susan Collins and friends offered. We shouldn't give Americans anything. Now, Toomey was whining about the budget and the deficit and inflation, but what's really going on here, and I'm just astonished that nobody in the media is saying this out loud, and I'm astonished that more Democrats aren't screaming this from the rooftops, because if the tables were turned, the Republicans would be. What's really going on here is that the Republicans are saying, we don't want the Democrats to pass a relief package that will put Americans back to work and get the economy going again, because then Democrats will win in the 2022 midterm elections. And a Democrat might even, Kamala Harris might even hold the presidency in 2024. No, we've got to cripple Joe Biden. We've got to cripple the economy. This was their mantra in 2009 when Obama proposed a $2 trillion bailout for the economy, and they got him to whittle it down to $900 billion. One-third of it, $300 billion, just being tax cuts. Only $600 billion in stimulus in 2009 to recover from the damage that George W. Bush had wreaked on this country. And then for the next 8 years, they complained about how slow the recovery was. Remember that? The Republican Party is demanding that Joe Biden shoot Santa Claus. Thank God, so far, most Democrats aren't listening. Although this idea of means testing it to $50,000 or less? I'll tell you about that right after the break. And we'll pick up your phone calls as we go along.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And by the way, I'm doing a book event tomorrow, Books and Books, in conversation with David Korten about my new book, The Hidden History of American Oligarchy. It's at thomhartmann.com for the link. And welcome back, Mike in Mercer Island, Washington. Hey, Mike, what's on your mind?
Good morning, Tom. Thank you so much. I understand your points about the filibuster, but I read Charles Blow's editorial last week that says, according to David Hornstein, Norman Hornstein, I think, 70% of the population, the Republicans will have 70 senators, perhaps, from 35 states, with only 30% of the population. So the filibuster will work against the Democrats very soon. It's something to be careful about. I just wanted your thoughts on that.
You mean getting rid of the filibuster will work against the Democrats?
Yes, because very soon, Charles Blow's editorial called, it's called Now or Never for Black Americans. The population is moving to 15 states, but that's only 30 senators. So the filibuster will never be able to be used.
Yeah, that may be true unless we get D.C. and Puerto Rico. Is that what I haven't read his op-ed, so Mike, I can't really speak to it. But is that what he's calling for?
Well, he's saying that it's a two-edged sword, and right now it's a good thing for the Democrats, but very soon, because of demographic changes, it will become something that will be very difficult. If it's gone, then the Democrats can never bring new legislation.
Yeah, I get that. Here's my take on this, Mike. We either believe in democracy or we don't. You know, I mean, every single member of the United States Senate, if they won their seat by one vote, would be sitting in the United States Senate proudly. In fact, quite a few of them won their seats by just a few hundred, or maybe one of them by a few hundred. Many of them by just a few thousand votes, and yet they're there because they say we love democracy, we believe in democracy. So democracy is 50% plus one. And that's how the Senate was laid out by the founders of this country back in 1787. It wasn't until the 1830s that John C. Calhoun started promoting the filibuster as a way to block any conversation about slavery and emancipation and the whole abolition movement. That was in the mid-1830s, and the filibuster was used exclusively from the time that John C. Calhoun got it into the Senate rules, the father of the Confederacy, until after the Civil War. It was used exclusively to block conversations about abolishing slavery. And from at the end of the Civil War until 1964, the filibuster was used exclusively to block civil rights legislation. Exclusively. And, now it's become this kind of routine way for the minority to stop the majority from doing anything. But I'm of the opinion, let it happen. The bizarre stuff that the Republicans want to push through in most cases, I think if it gets made into law, will simply blow up in their faces. Republicans have no rational governing agenda. If they're able to, if they take control of the Senate and the White House and the House and are able to pass their legislation, what are they going to pass? I mean, they're going to outlaw abortion. Okay, that's going to blow up in their faces. I remember when abortion was against the law. It was not popular to be, to be in favor of keeping it against the law. It was destroying people's lives, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll have to read Charles Blow's piece, Mike, and thanks for telling me about it. I appreciate the heads up. But on first blush, I'm thinking the filibuster is anti-democratic, small d democratic, and so we should just blow it up. We'll be right back. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. So with some fancy footwork math, you can take the GDP of the United States, the productivity, the amount of wealth that is produced, or goods and services that are produced every year by American workers, and divide it by the number of workers, and what you get is that the average worker in America is producing about $75 an hour worth of value for their employer. And the minimum wage pays them about 10% of that value. Now, back in 1950, the minimum wage paid 30% of the value of the productivity that the average worker is producing for their employer. If we took the minimum wage up to $15 an hour tomorrow, it would still be in the neighborhood of 20%. So there's a strong case for increasing the minimum wage based on history. I lay this all out in the new video that we have just for our people who are supporters of our program over at thomhartmann.com. And welcome back. Oh, by the way, you know, March 4th is the day that that Franklin Roosevelt was sworn in as president, because the Constitution specified that from the beginning of the Republic, March 4th. We amended that. I don't recall the year, but it was between the time that Franklin Roosevelt became president and the time that Dwight Eisenhower was installed. We amended it because the country was in such a crisis in November of 1932, when the election happened and Roosevelt was elected. The country was in such a terrible crisis that, and Herbert Hoover, the Republican president, refused to do anything. He kept saying, literally, recovery is just around the corner. His phrase, just around the corner. He repeated it over and over and over again. It became they threw it back in his face ultimately. But he didn't do anything. And so the country, it just got, unemployment got worse and worse and worse through November, and then December, and then January, and then February, and finally on March 4th, when FDR was sworn in, that week, every bank in America closed. Now, half of them had already shut down, but I mean, that was like when everything collapsed. And that was what FDR stepped into. And so they amended the Constitution to make January 20th the date that presidents get inaugurated, so that if the country was in crisis and had an incompetent president like Herbert Hoover, we'd never have to wait more than just a couple of months for the new president to take over. It was basically, from the first week or so of November until the January 20th, a little more than 2 months, basically, enough time to provide for a transition, for the new president to get his or her cabinet together and all that kind of stuff. Well, the Trumpies, the Trump cult, believe that Donald Trump is going to be re-inaugurated on March 4th. It's part of this bizarre conspiracy theory that people like Lauren Boebert or Boebert or whatever, and Marjorie Taylor Greene believe that, Taylor Greene, excuse me, believe that somehow because Ulysses S. Grant oversaw some legislation that somehow turned us from a country into a corporation, and therefore your Social Security number is actually your number as an enslaved person, and blah, 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 blah. It's just this bizarre conspiracy theory. But anyway, they believe that therefore that January 20th inauguration is not actually legal. It's not constitutional, because it's not part of the original Constitution as written by the founders. Of course, slavery was in the original Constitution, not by name, but it was certainly there. We took care of that. I wonder if they, I don't even have to wonder very much about what they think about that, whether that should be taken back. But in any case, they're all pins and needles for March 4th, because they think that's the day Donald Trump is going to stand up and proclaim himself President of the United States. And he's encouraging this, by the way, by refusing to let anybody refer to him as former president. All of his documentation, everything that he's producing out of his new presidential office down at Mar-a-Lago, something no other president has ever done before, says President Donald Trump, not former president. And all his press releases and things, they always refer to him as the 45th president of the United States, as if there are none after that. He is still president. He's encouraging the crazies. And now we get to why. You'll recall Donald Trump bragged during the primary that he'd be the first guy to make money running for the presidency. Well, he did. He made hundreds of millions of dollars. He made hundreds of millions of dollars as president. He made hundreds of millions of dollars in the weeks after he lost the presidency fundraising. He spent $10 million on legal fees and raised, as best anybody can tell, somewhere between $200 and $400 million. But here we get to the punchline. The rates at the Trump Hotel, now keep in mind, January 6th, the day of the attempted coup, they raised the rates. This is from Forbes magazine. The cheapest room available the night of the insurrection went for $8,000 in the Trump Hotel in D.C. Well, they just tripled the rates for some rooms in the Trump Hotel on the nights of March 3rd and March 4th. You think they're expecting something? I'm wondering if the Secret Service and the FBI are all over this. This is like, waving a flag. So, and Joe Biden wants to raise the corporate tax rate to 28%. Now, I just want to remind you, under Eisenhower it was 52%, and 1/3 of the federal government was funded by corporate taxes. JFK 52%, Johnson 52%, Nixon, Ford 48%, Carter 46%, Reagan 34%, Bush, Clinton, Bush, and Obama all 35%. Trump dropped it down to 21%. You wonder why corporate CEOs are paying themselves billions? Biden wants to raise that up to 28%. It'll still be the lowest it's been since the 1930s.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Okay, all that said, I'll pick up your phone calls right after this. Stick to the Thom Hartmann Program, your media support group for we the people.
Welcome to the Thom Hartmann Book Club. Today we're reading from Hannah Arendt's book, The Origins of Totalitarianism. And I've, known about this book, read little pieces of it for decades. I mean, it's the classic work on totalitarianism. It's long and there's a lot of words in it. But for this moment, Elliot Lustig was tweeting recently about Donald Trump. This is back when Donald Trump was talking about 3 to 5 million illegal immigrants voting, right? And he said, Hannah Arendt, in her book, The Origin of Totalitarianism, provides a helpful guide for interpreting the language of fascists. She noted how decent liberals of 1930s Germany would fact-check the Nazis' bizarre claims about things like Jews as if they were meant to be factual. What they failed to understand, Arendt suggests, is that the Nazi Jew-hating was not a statement of fact, but a declaration of intent. So when someone would blame the Jews for Germany's defeat in World War I, naive people would counter by saying, there's no evidence of that. What the Nazis were doing was not describing what was true, but what would have to be true in order to justify what they planned to do next. So did 3 million illegals cast vote in the election? Clearly not. But fact-checking is just a way of playing along with their game. What Trump is saying is not that 3 million illegals voted. What he's saying is, I'm going to steal the voting rights of millions of Americans. So that's kind of a contemporary frame for this book. So let's read from the book itself. Here, this is from page 348. And she's talking about totalitarian movements and how they use propaganda, how they communicate with the public, and the difference between terror and propaganda, the kind of terror that they can inculcate by just kind of randomly arresting people. Pretty much everybody's committed some kind of crime at some point, right? Arresting people, and on the one hand, that's the terror, or convincing the people. She says totalitarian movements use socialism and racism by emptying them of their utilitarian content, the interests of a class or a nation. The form of infallible protection in which these concepts were presented has become more important than their content. The chief qualification of a mass leader has become unending infallibility. He can never admit an error. The assumption of infallibility, moreover, is based not so much on superior intelligence as on the correct interpretation of the essentially reliable forces in history and nature, forces which neither defeat nor ruin and prove wrong because they're bound to assert themselves in the long run. Mass leaders in power have one concern which overrides all utilitarian consideration: to make their predictions come true. The Nazis did not hesitate to use, at the end of the war, the concentrated force of their still intact organization to bring about as complete a destruction of Germany as possible, in order to make true their prediction that the German people would be ruined in case of defeat. The propaganda effect of infallibility, the striking success of posing as a mere interpreting agent of predictable forces, has encouraged in totalitarian dictators the habit of announcing their political intentions in the form of prophecy. The most famous example is Hitler's announcement to the German Reichstag in January 1939, quote, "I want today once again to make a prophecy. In case the Jewish financiers succeed one more in hurling the people into a world war, the result will be the annihilation of the Jewish race in Europe," end of quote. Translated into non-totalitarian language, this means, I intend to make war and I intend to kill the Jews of Europe. Similarly, Stalin, in the great speech before the Central Committee of the Communist Party in 1930, in which he prepared the physical liquidation of intra-party right and left deviationists, described them as representatives of dying classes. This definition not only gave the argument its specific sharpness, but also announced in totalitarian style the physical destruction of those whose dying out had just been prophesied. In both instances, the same objective is accomplished. The liquidation is fitted into a historical process in which man not only suffers, or does or suffers what, according to some immutable law, is bound to happen anyway. As soon as the execution of the victims has been carried out, the prophecy becomes a retrospective alibi. Nothing happened but what has already been predicted. It does not matter whether the laws of history spell the doom of the classes and their representatives, or whether the laws of nature exterminate all those elements, democracies, Jews, Eastern subhumans, the Untermenschen, or the incurably sick. They are not fit to live anyway. Incidentally, Hitler, too, spoke of dying classes that, to their lies, their propaganda is marked by its extreme contempt for facts as such, for, in their opinion, fact depends entirely on the power of the man who can fabricate it. The assertion that the Moscow subway is the only one in the world is a lie only so long as the Bolsheviks have not the power to destroy all the others. In other words, the method of infallible prediction, more than any other totalitarian propaganda device, works. In the book, Hannah Arendt, The Origins of Totalitarianism.
On the Science Revolution this week, Dr. Bandy Lee, Yale School of Medicine author of The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump, joins us on how Trump and other cult leaders infect their disciples. Plus, Professor Richard Silberstein, Chief Scientist and Director of NeuroInsight's Research Program, drops by to explain the neuroscience of the creative geek. Have you been described as brilliant or genius, eccentric and or socially clumsy, absent-minded, and an independent thinker? This segment is for you. Tune in to The Science Revolution wherever fine podcasts are available. So to revisit very briefly, and then I'll pick up your phone calls, the article that I wrote this morning that I shared with you, that I read to you. The point of it was that, and I probably shouldn't have laughed afterwards, being impressed by my own cleverness. I'm sorry for that. But the point of it was that bin Laden never flew an airplane into a tower. Bin Laden didn't even plan the attack. Bin Laden arguably didn't know the details of the attack or when specifically it was going to happen. He provided some funding. He provided a lot of encouragement. He whipped his followers into a frenzy that led to the attack. But he sat back and watched it on television from his home in Afghanistan when it happened. How is that different? I mean, obviously the scale of the attack was, 3,000 dead people versus 5 dead people. But taking down the World Trade Center didn't threaten to end American democracy. Yeah, I know that the plane that went down in Pennsylvania was probably heading for the White House or the Capitol building. But it didn't succeed. Anyhow, I just leave that as an open question. The modest way, by the way, very quickly, the modest way to get around the filibuster. The reason that reconciliation exists, the Byrd Rule, or the reason why, reconciliation, the ability to get around the filibuster, is because the Constitution requires that Congress fund the government. And so if somebody is obstructing that with a filibuster, which is not in the Constitution, the filibuster is this rule that came about in the 1830s by John C. Calhoun to prevent a discussion of slavery on the floor of the Senate. They actually passed a law over on the House side, but in the Senate, no. So they needed the filibuster to block that, and that's what it was used for. From the 1830s, when John C. Calhoun helped put it into the Senate rules, until after the Civil War, and then from the end of the Civil War until 1964, the filibuster was only used against civil rights legislation. Everybody understood what the filibuster was for. But there are exceptions. There are a couple of categories. One, and by the way, I'm informed by this from a piece by a community member over at Daily Kos who goes by the handle DP, for what it's worth. You can find this over at Daily Kos. Easiest way to get the For the People Act. And what he or she is talking about is H.R. 1, the first piece of legislation that makes it harder for Republicans to suppress the vote and easier for Americans to actually exercise the franchise that the various amendments, particularly the 15th Amendment, which says the right of citizens of the United States shall vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. So, number one, you can get around the filibuster with Article 3 judicial appointments. Right? This was a change that was made by both Harry Reid at the federal court level and by Mitch McConnell at the Supreme Court level. Number two, you can use it to get around, budget bills because they're constitutionally mandated. Judges are constitutionally mandated. Legislation funding the government is constitutionally mandated. So the argument that this person is making is that the right to vote is constitutionally mandated too, and therefore Manchin and Sinema and everybody else should support amending the Senate rules to allow legislation to avoid a filibuster if it is brought pursuant to Section 2 of the 15th Amendment. I think it's a great idea. I don't know, it's super wonky. I don't know if it's going to go anywhere, but I think it's a great idea. I just wanted to share it with you. Courtney in Brooklyn, New York. Hey, Courtney, what's on your mind today?
Hello, morning or good afternoon, Tom. Just wanted to fill you in and let you know you was right about the GOP and their feelings about President Biden. He hasn't even enacted the policy that he's proposing. He's getting through the details, and they're already criticizing it. And this Republican commenter, it kind of amazed me. He talked about getting back to the policies of Ronald Reagan as if we're not operating in that construct today. You know, it baffles me because it's confusing because I'm wondering what he means by that. It's like, is he going to be extra Reagan? And it's like, so not to be so long-winded about it, but my point is you were right about what you were saying before, and it seems like this speak in particular is kind of dizzy because we're operating in the politics of Ronald Reagan right now, and for him to be a Republican speaker and not be aware of that and talking about getting back to the policies of Ronald Reagan, it's a bit startling.
I think it's time to toss some very simple questions at them, like, when did the top tax rate go back up to 74%? When did the tax rate on corporations go back up to 51%? When did it become illegal for corporations to buy back their own stock and use stock to compensate their executives and screw their employees? When did we go back to having a third of the American workforce unionized? When did we bring all our factories, the 65,000 factories that have left this country since Reagan left the White House? When did we bring those back? Huh? I mean, I'm with you, Courtney. Yeah, there you go. Let's get the answers. Courtney, thank you. Leslie is also in New York, in Central Square, New York. Hey, Leslie, what's up?
Hi, Tom. How you doing?
Good.
Hey,
what's on your mind?
Since the foundation of our country 260 years ago, right up until Reagan, pretty much, and Clinton, we had freedom of the press. That's what saved us from Trump or any dictatorship. When the people are able to, even if they don't agree on anything, they all get a chance to look at what's out there. Today, you only get one thing, okay, and that's not, you don't get facts, okay, from any of them, any of the news organizations. Between Clinton and Reagan, right on down through, okay, we haven't had freedom of the press since then, and that's a fact, and you know it, right?
Yeah, I don't disagree with you broadly speaking, but I think we need to make the point that that's not because the Fairness Doctrine is gone. It's because Reagan stopped enforcing the anti-monopoly laws in '83, and the Telecommunications Act of 1996 stopped enforcing the laws that required local ownership and prevented radio, television, and newspaper monopolies from existing in the United States. And as a consequence, we now have radio, television, newspapers, and increasingly large chunks of the internet owned by a very, very small handful of companies who are very politically active, have armies of lobbyists, have a very specific point of view, and are very tight in with the GOP. Good point, though. Jane in Gadsden, Alabama. Hey, Jane, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Can you hear me okay?
Just fine, Jane.
Okay, great. Listen, I've been hearing talk about the GOP does not want a fully functioning DOJ right now. They're dragging their feet on approving Merrick Garland. Okay.
Yeah, you know why that is, right?
Yeah. Why can't he just throw in there and be the acting Attorney General? Because that's all.
Yeah, that's a damn good question, and I thought he was. Are you sure he's not?
Well, no, I'm not, but I haven't heard anything about it, and I watch the news all day, every day.
Yeah, well, I haven't heard anything about it either, Jane, but I can't say for sure that he is or he isn't, but I can't imagine the Department of Justice running without a head, without. I don't know. It's something I'm going to have to look into. But I think, frankly, the reason why the Republicans don't want Merrick Garland or anybody, any Biden appointee to be running the Department of Justice is because the Department of Justice, largely through the FBI, but they have other means as well, is running the prosecutions of the Trump followers who were egged on by Republican senators like Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley to commit treason. And of course, Donald Trump.
They don't want to be brought before it, and their crimes tied to them. I'm so tired of them. By the way, your piece about Osama spot, that was wonderful.
Well, thank you, Jane. Thank you.
I
appreciate the
enjoyed
feedback.
That.
Thank you. I put a lot of thought into that this morning. Jane, thank you so much. It's great to hear from you, and thanks for watching us there in Gadsden, Alabama on Free Speech TV. It's 45 minutes past the hour. We'll be back in just a moment with more of your calls here on the Thom Hartmann Program, taking back the mainstream media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, right here. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls, thoughts, comments, questions, rants in just a moment. Stick around. welcome back. I just want to make sure that my rant about the 20th Amendment, let's see when it was ratified. The 20th Amendment was ratified January 23rd, 1933. Oh, wow. So that was before, yeah, it was, interesting. In fact, I think somebody wanted to comment on that. Yeah, Dave in Valley Forge, California. Hey, Dave, lay it out.
That was pretty much what I called to say, was that it was ratified just before he was inaugurated. So,
how did Herbert Hoover feel about that? Do you know?
I have no idea. All I've done is gone to my reference books, and I saw that it was proposed on March 2nd of 32, so during the campaign, and then it was ratified, 6 months later, March 2nd of 32.
Yeah, March 2nd of 32. Interesting, very interesting.
Yeah.
So they were anticipating. Well, I'm guessing they were anticipating getting rid of Hoover, and everybody could tell which way the wind blew, and they wanted to get somebody other than Hoover in there as quickly as possible, and Congress. Again, I'm not sure if the date that Congress gets sworn in was changed. Congress is typically sworn in in the first week of January, isn't it? And so, when Congress was sworn in, they would have been able to ratify that 20th Amendment. Well, actually, they would have been waiting for the states, because it has to go through the House and Senate first, and then it goes out to the states. So it would have been 3/4 of the states coming back by January, whatever it was. Very, very interesting. Dave, thank you. It is so cool to hang out with people like you, Dave, who care about details and are the smartest people on, smartest radio listeners out there. Thank you again. Dennis in Aptos, California. Hey, Dennis, what's up?
Well, I wanted to go back to your thinking that perhaps there's going to be another attempt on the Capitol or on various capitals in the United States, state capitals, on March 4th.
I wasn't suggesting that, I although I wouldn't rule it out.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. If you think about it, what was there? Maybe about 2,000-3,000 plus people try to get into the Capitol. How many got in? Maybe 500, 600. They've only arrested, the FBI has only arrested about less than 200? That means there's a lot
the official
of people
date.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say the official number, I think it was 197. Sorry, there's just this a quarter-second delay when I do the show remotely like we've been doing this last year. My apologies, Dennis. Finish up.
Yeah, sure. So if there's thousands of people out there that never got arrested yet and probably aren't even worried about it, and who's to say that they're making reservations right now to come back to Washington and try it again? I don't know if the National Guard has a shoot-to-kill order this time, but I certainly would have that order if I was the general in charge.
Yeah, I'm sure they don't. But what it tells us is that the guys running the Trump organization, Uday and Qusay, clearly believe that there's going to be a lot of people in Washington D.C. on March 4th, because they've tripled the rates in some of the rooms in their hotel in the Trump Hotel on the 3rd and 4th. Dennis, thanks for the call. It's amazing, isn't it? The scams that this guy runs. We'll be back in 1 minute. Stick around. Hey, my new book is out. The Hidden History of American Oligarchy, Reclaiming Our Democracy from the Ruling Class. Want to know more? The links are all over at thomhartmann.com. Our video for our supporters of our program this week that's available over at thomhartmann.com talks about the radical idea of universal health care. What countries in the world might actually have universal health care? Something that, according to Republicans, we're just not smart enough or competent enough or whatever. It's too radical an idea, They include Australia, Austria, Belgium, Canada, Chile, Czech Republic, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Iceland, Israel, Italy, Japan, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, Poland, Portugal, South Korea, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, Turkey, and the United Kingdom. So why can't we do it here? Well, because you've got an entire political party, the Republican Party, and a few Democrats who are wholly owned subsidiaries of the health insurance industry. And you got a health insurance industry that's paying its CEOs millions, in one case, United Healthcare, billions, or billion. And so good luck. Anyhow, it's over at ThomHartmann.com. Oh, welcome back. Richard in Underwood, Iowa. Hey, Richard, what's up?
Good morning. The recovery checks are going out, and the Republicans are complaining that it's too much money, and some people are getting more money than they deserve. The Republicans are always looking for a tax cut. How about if you get too much money, you give that money to the food bank, and then you can claim a tax deduction?
Yeah. You know, this whole thing of means testing is just insane. And Bernie Sanders is pointing out, over the weekend that people making $55,000 in many parts of this country are not wealthy or well off, particularly if they have a large family. And it's the total income for their household. But beyond that, I mean, it was 70,000 last time around. Now they want to cut it to 50,000. This is what happens when you means test programs. This is what happened. The welfare programs that LBJ put into place with the Great Society were fairly generous, and they helped cut poverty in half in about a decade, in about 10 years in the United States. And then Republicans and a few conservative Democrats came along. Bill Clinton, I'm going to end welfare as we know it. How did he do that? He block granted things to the states, and he means tested programs. When you start means testing programs, you turn them into welfare programs. And then all you have to do if you want to get rid of them is just make it harder and harder and harder to qualify for them, which is exactly what they do in red states with Medicaid. It's because every state sets their own limits. And this is just crazy. We should just say, there's going to be about 150,000 people who make more than $300,000 or $400,000 a year, right? I mean, there's not that many really rich people in the United States in terms of annual income. And so what? The amount of money that they're going to get with a $1,400 check is to them meaningless, and to us less expensive to give them the checks than to go jump through all the hoops of comparing their income and last year and this year. And by the way, this also tells you why the Republicans want them to use 2019 numbers, because a lot of those people who are making $50,000 to $150,000 a couple of years ago in 2019, those suburban voters who make $50,000 to $150,000 a year are the GOP's base, white suburban voters. They run like 60, 70, 80%, depending on where it is, toward Republicans. And so what the GOP is trying to do is make sure that Joe Biden doesn't give them anything. So they'll remain pissed off with Democrats, and they'll say, Biden here, rah, rah, rah. This is so transparently political and wrong, frankly. Richard, thank you. I'm with you. Ari in Eureka, California. Hey, Ari, what's up?
Hi, Art. Hi, Tom. This is the conversation you just had is exactly why Democrats should only have one answer to anything that Republicans say. It should be 5 words, and it should be Amy Coney Barrett, Merrick Garland.
Right.
We should just do whatever we want at this point. I mean, I understand that Biden needs to pretend to be bipartisan, but he knows better. And that puts it all on them, and the rest of us should just do whatever we want, just like they did.
The other rebuttal would be only 3 words, and it would be the one that Ronald Reagan used over and over and over again, which is elections have consequences.
Oh yeah, that too. And what was that T-shirt about your feelings? What was that?
Yes.
We can't say on the air?
Exactly. Yeah. No, you can't say it on the air, but yes, I'm totally with you. Ari, thank you. Brilliant. John in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Hey, John, what's up?
Good morning, and thank you for taking my call. I heard you speak earlier about Joe Biden proposing a 28% individual taxpayer proposal.
No, it's the corporate income tax.
Oh, corporate income.
Joe Biden is, the corporate income tax was in the 30s throughout the Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Bush, and Obama administrations. And Trump dropped it to 21%. Biden's saying, let's take it up to 28%.
Yeah, I kind of got that mixed up on my question. I'm sorry. Realizing that say when 74% when Reagan came into office, and Joe Biden saying, hey, I'd like to see a 28% corporate tax. Do you think that maybe Joe Biden might be wanting to fund the federal government heavily from individuals as opposed to corporate? And what that may
by raising the corporate tax by, almost 30%. It looks to me like he wants. I mean, 1/3 of the total funding for our government during the Eisenhower administration was the corporate tax, and corporations were doing just fine, thank you very much. Just like when you have a high tax rate on individuals, it causes CEOs to take less pay and pay their workers better. When you have a high corporate tax on corporations, pretty much any corporation knows how to get to pay no taxes. You don't show any profit. And if you don't want to show any profit, you just put your money back into your company and you pay your people well.
Yes, and that's why I'm kind of hoping that if we can do this again, because then you're right, as they will, the corporations will be more enticed to pay their workers better, and the ones that do make the big money, well, that's and
that helps fund the government.
It wants to increase it by 30%. Yes, I agree. 30% is a nice number, but when it's at 21% already,
there you go. John, thank you. Thank you. Spot on. I mean, let's just go back to sanity, huh? We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. The Clean Phone Pro, phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. Plexiderm, real science, real results. More info at plexiderm.com, code TOM. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More information at expressvpn.com/Tom. Gabby takes the pain out of insurance shopping. More info at gabby.com/Tom. HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at hellofresh.com, code TOM. And Superbeats, heart chews for heart healthy energy. More info at superbeatsradio.com/Tom.
Our book today is Microtrends Squared by Mark Penn. The first chapter, The Building Blocks of Change Today, The Power of Microtrends. We live in a microtrends world. It's driven by granular, often opposite patterns of human behavior that seem small but punch above their size. We've identified these powerful patterns as microtrends, and the world is full of them. Together they are the dots of a global impressionist painting that comes to life when you step back and look at it holistically. These forces have only become more impactful in recent years, and they've started to upend society. 10 years ago, when I first identified these patterns and change in microtrends, I saw a world of boundless opportunities. I was over-the-top optimistic about how microtrends would produce a new world of personalized products on our shelf, and how in Washington they would produce an even greater selection of fresh, first-rate political choices. Of course, that's not exactly what happened. Instead, the information age has given way to the disinformation age, in which fake information abounds. The nation founded on free speech is grappling with how to live with free speech in the era of the internet troll.
The optimism around our economy faded with the unexpected crash of 2008, followed by a historically slow recovery over a decade. Only now is it recovering. Unparalleled consumer choice is leading not to the growth of more startups, but to the dominance of just a few internet companies, which are amassing more and more power on the basis of data gleaned from willing but unknowing consumers. And the older generations, who in their own youth, led a rebellion, have now dug in their heels against the politics and culture of today's new generations. What makes the microtrend such a powerful tool in this moment is that it can unpack and explain changes that we're seeing that otherwise make no sense. On the surface, for example, the middle class can seem to be shrinking, and this is alarming. But it is only by digging deeper and seeing that education is driving more people into the upper classes that we can come to understand these overall statistics at a more molecular level. Often, two diametrically opposed trends are occurring at the same time, which would be invisible in the averages, but which leap out when understood as the result of a cauldron of microtrends. Today in politics, for example, there is no overall ideological shift. Instead, one group of moderates became more conservative and another group became more liberal, causing society to become both more liberal and more conservative at the same time, essentially canceling each other out. This increased polarization then produces even more gridlock and confusion. We can see similar tugs and pulls throughout society. While one group seeks more technology, another one wants to sit in the Amtrak quiet car. Some can't sit through a 6-second commercial. Others spend hours and hours binge-watching TV. Some live in a world of globalization, while others yearn for a return to greater nationalism. To explain all this, we've borrowed from Newtonian physics. For every trend, there is a counter-trend. It's human nature in the information age. Every move or desire in one direction seems to inspire a counter-move by another group in the opposite direction. For every radical group, there's a new conservative group. For every new product in mobile technology, there are those sticking to the flip phone. Only by understanding the complexity of these developments can we make sense of a world that seems senseless, confused, and even jumbled. While in 2007, microtrends allowed you to navigate the changes of the day, now microtrends squared lets you better understand the emerging chaos as the seesawing of opposite forces fighting for dominance in the social, political, and cultural worlds. In the last decade, technology was able to exploit and even conquer the world of microtrends with its ability to customize products and our lives based on AI and big data. But even as these attempts have transformed our lifestyles, they've also led to some serious unintended consequences that have further clouded society. Microtrends disentangles many of these shifts and lies at the source of many battles for power that have disrupted our world today. As you'll see throughout this book, those ongoing battles will result in some very unlikely winners, losers, and shifts in the overall power match of society. While the technology behind increased personalization of goods and services has been providing us with more choice in our daily life, we've instead been making fewer choices, burrowing into comfortable silos. We expected that the advances in our ability to customize goods and services would open us all up to a new world of never-ending experimentation. A decade later, exactly the opposite has occurred, and our society has become increasingly polarized, with people finding choices they like and picking them over and over again. In 2007, microtrends explained how the Starbucks economy had succeeded the Ford economy. In the Ford economy, you could have any color you wanted as long as it was black. The aim of industry was to mass-produce products at the lowest possible cost, and that meant standardization of goods. But the new economy of the 21st century was moving starkly away from that model, instead providing consumers with any color they wanted. The Starbucks economy was based on creating greater value through customization, even of simple products like coffee and tea. People everywhere became more individualistic in their tastes and were rebelling from carefully mowed lawns and white picket fences. The marketplace responded to these trends by allowing people to have it their own way, and they did. The theory was that more choice would result in a happier and more satisfied group of consumers. Variety would open consumers up to new experiences, in many ways bringing us closer together, allowing us to mix, match, and try out all sorts of new options. Something rather surprising happened, however, as consumers got more choice. The book Microtrends Squared.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. 6 minutes past the hour. Thom Hartmann here with you. On the line with us is former state senator, Colorado State Senator Ted Harvey. He represented District 30 from 2007 to 2015, and he is the chairman of the Committee to Defeat the President. The website is stopjoe.com. His Twitter handle is Ted Harvey. Senator Harvey, welcome to the program. Glad to have you with us.
Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. First of all, before we get into the issues here, just reassure me. I went over to your website, stopjoe.com. It asked me for my email address and information. I gave that, clicked through, and it took me to a page where it said, please give us money. I didn't see anything about issues. I didn't see anything about positions. I didn't, that's all I could see. Reassure me that your site is not just a money-making scam like Trump was running after he lost the election.
I can assure you that we actually started our PAC in 2013 as the Stop Hillary PAC, and I believe we became one of the most influential PACs in the country to make sure that Hillary Clinton never stepped foot in the White House again. And then when Trump won the election in 2016 and was sworn in 2017, and we saw the Democrats having temper tantrums, if not riots, on the streets of America all across the country, we changed the name of our PAC to the Committee to Defend the President, and we became one of the largest pro-Trump PACs in the country. And we have one of the largest followings with hundreds of thousands of members that help us put pressure on the Democrats and win elections around the country. And when Joe Biden got sworn in on January 20th, we changed the name of the PAC to the Committee to Defeat the President, not the Committee to Defend the President. And our goal is to make sure that we push back on the Democrats for another 4 years and to try to save our culture and our Constitution and our conservative values.
Okay, I got it, and you've got my email address now. I've signed up, so I look forward to getting your emails. So the piece that we got from you or from your office, suggesting you as a guest for the program, basically said that Joe Biden is promoting some sort of radical left agenda and it's going to destroy America. Correct me if I'm paraphrasing incorrectly. I'm curious if that's the case. And we can, over time, if you're willing to come back on the program, I'm guessing we can touch on many different topics, but let's drill down into a couple of them. How specifically do you see Joe Biden and the Democrats working to destroy America, to destroy our country and our, and the principles that this country was founded on?
Well, I think that our country was founded on the rule of law. I think our country was founded on the fact that we are a capitalistic free market economy. I think that the policies that the president has been pushing just in the few weeks that he's been in office through his executive orders are going to harm America and harm our sovereignty.
But that's all. Senator Harvey, respectfully, that's all kind of vague rhetoric. Specifically, right. What policy? Give me one policy, and then we can move to the next and the next if you'd like. But give me one policy that Joe Biden is pushing that you think is going to destroy America.
Well, when he said that he was not going, that when he told the ICE and the border security folks to not check the legal status of anybody that they are catching and to let them go and to stop the construction of the border and divert the money that was appointed for the construction of the border wall, I think that's very detrimental to our sovereignty as a country. I think if you look at what he's doing with regards to energy and saying that he is not going to
let's take these one at a time. Let's stick with the border wall and immigration, and then we can go to energy if you'd like.
Sure.
So I'm assuming that your concern is not that you're some kind of wild right-wing racist who hates the idea of brown people coming into the United States and perhaps finding a path to citizenship or something like that, that probably your concern is more economic. You don't want jobs going away? Or what specific... First of all, I don't know that Biden has said to ICE, no, you can't identify people. And the border... Well, yeah, we have a border wall, but we also, prior to the pandemic, we had 1 million people from Mexico coming into the United States every single day. And we had about 1 million people from the United States going back into Mexico every single day. We have an enormous amount of trade, traffic, and tourism that goes across that border legally. I mean, the guys who hit us on 9/11 came into this country legally on tourist visas. So you've got a lot of, the majority of people who are in this country illegally. Let me just finish my thought, and then you can go however, whatever you want. The majority of the people in this country who came here illegally did not cross the Rio Grande. They came in as tourists and stayed, and they got employment. I mean, you've got meatpacking plants up in the north that were printing help wanted ads in Spanish in newspapers in Mexico. So if your concern is about the economic impact of these folks, then why would you support Republican policies that go back to Ronald Reagan, 1986, where he officially stopped prosecuting employers who hire people who are in this country illegally? I lived in Germany for a year. It took me 6 months to get a damn work permit. I worked in Australia. It took me 3 months to get a work permit. Those countries, if you hire somebody who's not in the country legally, you go to jail. And that was the case in the United States before Reagan suspended that. Why are Republicans opposed to putting employers in prison?
I'm not. I think we should be. I think that we should be enforcing the laws of this
don't you
country.
think? Mitt Romney ran on this in 2012. He said, if we simply started enforcing these laws against employers, against wealthy white employers hiring people who are here illegally, you would see people, quote, self-deport. He was ridiculed for it, but I think he was right. History shows he was right. So how is a wall or ICE, grabbing people going to stop millions of tourists coming into the United States from staying if they can get gainful employment?
Well, I agree with everything you just said. I think that we should be enforcing the laws. We should be penalizing employers. When I was in the state legislature here in Colorado, that was one of my number one objectives as a state legislator.
Then why won't Republicans go along with it?
Because
Bernie Sanders and Sherrod Brown have been singing this song for years. Literally decades. And Republicans constantly fight them on this.
Not all Republicans. I'm one that agrees with them on that issue. I believe that we are a nation of laws and we should be enforcing the laws. And if people want to come here legally, regardless of their color, red, yellow, black, or white, we should have the ability to check out their medical backgrounds, their criminal backgrounds, and determine whether they are going to be a benefit to our society. As a sovereign country,
so if we simply did that, Senator Harvey. Yeah, and by the way, just a heads up, we have about 45 seconds till we hit the break here. If we were to do that, then all this hysteria around the border wall and ICE would become pretty irrelevant, wouldn't it?
But we're not. And we have an open border where people are flooding through our borders, and we don't know what their background is or what their intentions are when they come to this country. And that is one of the main reasons why we need to have a border wall, because it is a sieve. And people aren't doing that from all over the rest of the world. We are able to check all of their immigration paperwork before they come here. Why should we not be doing that on people that are flooding across?
Because it's ineffective.
Borders? I believe we should.
Because it's used by racist demagogues. It's ineffective. Anyhow, I'm sorry.
I
was going to let you have the last word.
Demagogue.
No, I'm not. But I'm saying that this whole border wall argument, and let's ignore the employers, is used by racist demagogues. Senator Ted Harvey, he's the chairman of the Committee to Defeat the President, StopJoe.com. Senator Harvey, thanks for dropping by.
Thank you, buddy. God bless. Have a great day.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
15 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stick around. And welcome back. Let's see here. Sharon in Phoenix, Arizona. Hey, Sharon, what's on your mind today?
The filibuster is on my mind, Tom. Thank you for taking my call. I'm in Phoenix. I emailed Kristen Sinema and sent her an email about the filibuster. And I called her Phoenix office The voicemail was full, so I called her Senate office in Washington and left a message with the lady that if she does not get rid of the filibuster, or if she votes to keep the filibuster, I'm a senior citizen. I vote every election. Not only will I vote against her, but I will also organize against her. Now, my question is, why is it the Republicans so effectively use the filibuster to get what they want, but the Democrats don't? That's my question.
Well, Democrats have used the filibuster in the past. Mostly it was the racist Southern Democrats pre-64 to fight civil rights legislation. I'm not enough of a scholar, Sharon, of the history of the filibuster, the modern use of the filibuster. Let me rephrase that. I'm real familiar with the history of it, but the modern use of the filibuster to answer your question. But I think I keep coming back to this point. Either the Senate believes in democracy or they don't. Every single one of those senators, if they won an election by one vote, would proudly serve in the United States Senate. Why can't legislation be passed by one vote? Sharon, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. There's some sort of very strange noise there. James in Lexington. Hey, James, what's on your mind? Thanks for watching us on Facebook
Hey, Tom.
Live.
Long time, first time. One quick point. According to the AG's website, Monty Wilkinson has been acting AG since January 20th.
Right, yeah, Sean told me that. I'm sorry, I should have corrected, let people know that. And I'm scratching my head about why Joe Biden doesn't just appoint Merrick Garland. Maybe he's just saying, we're going to go through the process. Yeah, do you know anything about Monty Wilkinson?
I've never really heard of him.
Yeah, okay. But presumably he's not a Republican troll, so maybe that's a good first step. So is that what you called about?
I also had one question. A few years ago, you like to talk about a clip that was on CNBC about a wealthy German guy that was freaking out at the CNBC anchor because he says, I like my high taxes because I'd rather be
it was
a
on
rich
Bloomberg,
man
actually.
in a wealthy country.
I'm pretty sure.
Who?
I was traveling. I was in Europe. I was watching TV late at night in a hotel room, and I'm pretty sure that was on Bloomberg, but it might have been some other network. Are you looking for the original clip? Is that where you're going with that?
Yeah, because every time my Google Food's not bad, but I can never get that quote to pop up anything that says something like that.
Yeah, it was just something that flew by on TV. To the best of my knowledge, it was never put on the internet or made into an internet meme or anything. I wrote about it at the time, or maybe a few weeks later. I wrote an op-ed about it. I've included it in at least one of my books. I remember it quite vividly. But not everything that happens on TV, particularly on the more obscure programs. This was literally the middle of the night. It was out of Singapore, as I recall, or maybe Hong Kong, and that the show was, running. And there was some sort of a conference going on, and maybe there's something about the conference, but I'm sorry I can't give you a specific link to it, James. James, I got to run, but thank you for the call, and thanks for watching us there on Facebook Live. It's great to hear from you. We'll be right back. It's coming up on 20 minutes past the hour. You can find an absolutely fascinating library of my writings, including my daily rants, over at thomhartmann.medium.com. So over at thomhartmann.com, we just put up a new video for our supporters, the people who support our program, that talks about Malcolm X saying, if you're not careful, the newspapers will have you hating the people who are oppressed and loving the people who are the oppressors. He said that 55 years ago to, this month, February. In 1965, and what that actually means, how that warning from Malcolm X was apparently taken to heart by the Republican Party in 1981 through the Reagan presidency, and we actually saw this shift in America to the point where that led to everything. Stop and frisk, and the demonization of homeless people, and the demonization of poor people, and black people, and Muslim people, and all of this stuff. Came out of this very specific kind of Lee Atwater strategy in the 1980s. So you can find it over at thomhartmann.com and check it out. Welcome back. You know, there's good news and bad news. The good news is that more and more of the world is getting vaccinated. More and more of America is getting vaccinated. The bad news is that this new variant of the COVID virus that popped up first in South Africa and has now appeared in numerous countries, and I believe has appeared in the United States, the AstraZeneca vaccine only is 10% effective against it. In fact, in South Africa, they have stopped the rollout of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. Pfizer, the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine, they're saying that still works against the variant. And if I'm remembering correctly, the Pfizer vaccine is the one that requires the dry ice cooling, and the AstraZeneca just requires the cooling, although I may have them backward, all these companies. But you know, so this is one of the reasons why it's so important to get the virus under control all around the world. It's one of the reasons why it was so important to control it in the beginning here in the United States and elsewhere. It's one of the reasons why the failure of the Chinese Communist government to acknowledge it and, you know, and putting a whistleblower in jail or punishing him and all that kind of stuff was, you know, such a horrible crime. And, you know, I get it that was Donald Trump's hobby horse, but even a stopped clock is right twice a day. Not to say that all of his attacks on China were right, but this virus should not have gone around the world the way it did. And now it's mutating to become more effective, more contagious, and more deadly. We know now that the British variant, which is spreading rapidly in the United States, is doubling every 7 to 9 days, the number of this, which means that by the end of next month, it's going to be the major virus variant in the United States. This new virus, this B117 variant, a cloth mask is no protection. You've got to use a KN95 or an N95 mask, a real respirator mask. And being just 6 feet away from somebody is not necessarily enough. And we know now that this new variant, you know, the old original COVID tended not to spread through entire buildings through ventilation systems. This new one can. So we need to double down on being careful, double down on asking people to, hey, back up, please. Hey, put your mask on, put it on tight, put it on right, wearing your own masks. If you don't have KN95 masks, get some. They're all over the place. You can buy them from all different kinds of places. One of our sponsors sells them, but they're also on Amazon, and they're not hard to find any longer. It costs $2 or $3 typically a piece. You can use. Louise and I have been using one actually because we carry them when we go on our walks. We've been using a couple of them for seems like several months now. And some of them, are designed even to be washed and things like that. But this is scary stuff. It is the official news here. This Eric Feigelding, who was on this program week before last, just tweeted this: a surging B117 within the U.S. It's growing 7% a day, doubling every 9.8 days nationally, and expected to become dominant by March 23rd. It is surging fastest in Florida, doubling every 9.1 days. Scientists are extremely worried. It's 35 to 45% more transmissible. And of course, Florida is where we just had this giant football game with 20,000 people in the stands. None of this good stuff. And I have a horrible feeling that we're going to see the consequences of this coming out soon. I want to emphasize one more time, I was just horrified Saturday morning. In fact, it motivated me to write my Saturday op-ed for Medium.com about how they're at it again. The Republicans are at it again. They're saying Democrats can't be Santa Claus. We get to be the tax cut Santa Claus, us Republicans, but those Democrats, they cannot be Santa Claus. No way, not allowed. Instead, what they have to do is cut back. Pat Toomey, Pennsylvania Republican Senator Pat Toomey, who is going to retire, but clearly he's going to retire into some, cushy $1 million a year corporate job, as Republicans tend to do when they leave Congress, was saying we shouldn't give anything, not $1,400, not $300, not $60, not $10. We should give nothing to the states. We should give nothing to the cities. To hell with the police departments and fire departments and EMTs that are overwhelmed and are going to be even more overwhelmed as this new B117 variant starts sweeping across the United States over the next 6 weeks. He was basically saying, screw them all. And Jake Tapper never asked the question or never pointed out, aren't you just saying that because, like Mitch McConnell said early on in the Obama administration, my main job is to make Barack Obama a one-term president. Aren't you just saying that because you want to hurt Joe Biden? Aren't you just saying that because you want President Biden to fail? Aren't you just saying that because you want the economy to continue to suck? Because that'll help, then Republicans can come along in 2022 and say, well, you elected the Democrats, you put them in charge of the White House, the Senate, and the House, and they didn't do a damn thing. Put us in charge, we'll fix everything. That's what they say every time they screw things up and they get a chance to come back in.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with your calls after the break. Stick around. In this camera, right? 3. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Minority Leader, How to Lead from the Outside and Make Real Change by Stacey Abrams. This is from Chapter 1, although the introduction is fascinating too, where she talks about, Rhodes scholarships and stuff, but this is Chapter 1. I sit in the living room, a cozy space, warm in the early summer. I'm perched on the edge of a sofa next to Valerie, the home's owner, a lovely black woman in her late 40s. Across from us, seated close together on a wide settee meant for one, are her 2 children, a son and a daughter. Politicians rarely visit their streets, which are nestled in a poorer community in South Georgia. Valerie beams with pride that both her children are headed to college in the fall. David, 17, plans to study criminology. Maya, 18, her belly round with her first child, intends to become a middle school teacher. Both newly graduated from high school, Maya will give birth in mere weeks and begin college months later, an unwed teen mother. Her intended school is more than 3 hours north of her home, so her mother will raise her newborn baby while she starts her freshman year. Valerie speaks matter-of-factly about the coming challenge, raising a new child just as hers leaves the nest. Still, she is determined that both her children pursue college degrees that she never received. Maya, the mother-to-be, wonders how she'll do so far away from home and her baby. Yet in the next breath, she explains how college will be the best for her and her child. Their future success rests upon her. I've come to their home as part of my campaign for governor, so I asked Valerie what she expects of someone like me. What can I do to help make lives like hers better? In her soft voice, she replies, she just wants options for financial aid for her children. They will succeed, she says, if they can afford to stay in school. As I look around the modest home passed down through the generations, I understand both the pride and the desperation tangled in her response. She got them through and has given them the tools to carve out better lives for themselves. We chat more about the worries she's lived with all those years, our discussion turning to the crime and poverty in their neighborhood. Then I ask Valerie what she wants. At first, all I get in response is a quizzical look to suggest I need to reconsider my bid for higher office. Or that suggests. I repeat, what do you want for you? What secret dream do you have for yourself? Her confused expression turns to one of surprise. I don't know, she tells me. I've been a cashier at the Piggly Wiggly for 20 years. You must want something, I probe, something you'd like to do for you? A daycare, she admits quietly. I'd like to start a daycare center for unwed mothers like my daughter, so more girls can finish school and pursue their dreams. But that ambition is beyond her. Her body language, her tone of voice, her averted gaze speak louder than her words. I press her, but she demurs with a smile. Let's just see what happens if you win the governor's job, she says. Valerie's house in South Georgia is not too different from the squat red brick house where I grew up on South Street in Gulfport, Mississippi. An oak tree grew out in our front yard, shadowing the front sidewalk, forbidding grass to grow beneath its shade. Pink azaleas bloomed each spring from bushes that flanked the front door. Our rented house and the other set close by teemed with children, all black, all working class. We played in our postage-stamped yards, make believing the fantastical. Superhero exploits, cops and robbers, As we got older, we'd talk about moving to New Orleans or living in one of the mansions along the beachfront that lay less than 5 miles away, across the railroad tracks that ran in between our neighborhood and the more wealthy environs. We dreamed of more, while our parents' lives centered around survival and making it from paycheck to paycheck. Instinctively, we understood that more had to be possible, even if we didn't know what to do to get there. These imaginings, these desires, are the roots of ambition. As adults, like Valerie, we tend to edit our desires until they fit our construction of who we're supposed to become. In such a world, I wouldn't dare dream of running for higher office, for mayor or governor or president. At least for now, Valerie sees herself retiring in 20 more years from Piggly Wiggly as a cashier, rather than as a small business owner who helps the community raise its children. From our brief meeting, I could see she had the fire, albeit of a low burn, of a minority leader. She had ambition, she had vision, but she didn't have the faith, and understandably so. Whether we come from working class neighborhoods or grow up comfortably middle class, minorities rarely come of age explicitly thinking about what we want and how to get it. People already in power almost never have to think about whether they belong in the room, much less if they would be listened to once outside. These men, and they are usually men and typically white, do not have to grapple with low expectations based on gender or race or class. Ambition for them begins with reminiscences of old times and older friendships or newer alliances. The ends have already been decided. Only the means are to be discussed. Most potential minority leaders feel the same lack of faith Valerie had, at least at some point in their evolution. We may not know how to get the first job, let alone make it to the big chair. We don't know how to take the leap from accepting our fates to actually changing them, and not just a little, but radically. Then there are those who simply don't know what they want. The drive to achieve burns inside, often without a clear target. We want to be something, but what that is remains hazy. Often we cannot articulate our goals because they lie just beyond the reach of who we're supposed to be. Ambition's scale is irrelevant. What holds us back is not scope, it's fear. And because we don't know what to call our dreams, don't know how to make them happen, or are pretty sure we'll be disappointed, we just stand still. We become a minority, but becoming a minority leader demands that we embrace ambition as our due. Stacey Abram. Hey, my new book is out, The Hidden History of American Oligarchy, Reclaiming Our Democracy from the Ruling Class. Want to know more? The links are all over at thomhartmann.com. We have a new video up over at thomhartmann.com about conspiracy theories. Abby Richards came up with a kind of a hierarchy of conspiracies, maybe a variation on the old Maslow hierarchy. And it goes from actual conspiracies to maybe this was a conspiracy, maybe not, we have questions, to this is kind of crazy stuff, but who knows, flying saucers, for example, to actual science denial, conspiracy theories that actually serve to promote the interests of a particular industry or wealthy individuals, to the totally crazy stuff, the flat earth, the reptilian overlords and all that kind of thing, conspiracy theories that can do tremendous damage. And, one of those being one of the conspiracy theories that, brought two Republicans into Congress this year. So anyhow, I lay the whole thing out with a new video for our supporters over at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you and Paul in Woodinville, Washington. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind?
Yeah, Tom, I was thinking about the Biden's COVID relief package, and wouldn't it be a good idea for the House to offer or make it public and publicly offer to reinstate the Trump tax cuts for the middle class, the ones that expired on December 31st, and say we'll reinstate these for 2 years and make the Senate Republicans filibuster that. And the reason for doing this is, first of all, to highlight the fact that they have expired and that this is Biden being bipartisan by offering to put them back. And, of course, the Republicans will filibuster that because they don't want any Democrat victories. So then, after they filibuster it, you can point the finger at them and say, look, they don't want you to have anything. Even though the those tax cuts that expired really didn't do squat for people making under 70,000. My understanding is that most people, it had no effect just because of the way the bill was written. It really didn't save anybody any money. But so that's why it's no harm to put it in. And then after they filibuster, you pull it off the table and put Biden's tax cut for the middle class in there, including the child income tax credit.
That he just rolled out this weekend. Yeah, and they could bundle that together. I think that's a great suggestion, Paul. By the way, Bernie Sanders just issued he just got his report back from the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, and I don't know if the CBO has been stacked with Trumpers or what. But Bernie points out that 10 years ago, when he first proposed a national $15 minimum wage, the CBO scored it as saying it would increase the deficit by less than $1 million over 10 years, and therefore, because it didn't have a consequential effect on the budget, it couldn't be included in reconciliation. We've got this big budget bill that they're debating reconciliation on. Well, the CBO just came out and said that increasing the minimum wage would increase the deficit by $54 billion. Now, Bernie says, I have no idea how they came up with this number. But the fact that they have said that increasing the minimum wage will have an effect on the budget means that it can be included in this COVID relief package because it is budget related. And that's the touchstone. That's the key. That's what makes it possible or not. So, I
don't think we've had a federal minimum wage increase since I think it was 2007. This is now the longest running period of stagnant minimum wage. It had been first from 1981 to 1991, and then it was from
the Reagan era.
97 to 2007. They're both 10-year periods, and now it's been almost 14 years since there's been a national increase in the national minimum wage. And people talk
about the cost
of
living has gone up.
Yeah, precisely. It's gone up. And it is the states that still have the federal minimum wage, the 725, are, of course, the worst performing economic states. They're all red states. They're essentially the bottom 40%. 20 states they're all red states. Terrible. And they talk about, what happened in Seattle. Seattle is now the minimum wage in Seattle. I just checked the website a little while. It's not 15, it's $16.39 now. And I think that what people don't realize is that in King County, they talked about, it's going to hurt business. Well, in King County, where half of it, remember, half of King County, because where I live, Kirkland, it didn't apply to Kirkland. It only applied to Seattle. But where restaurants went out of business like crazy, like they always do, is on the east side, where it was not $15 an hour. The restaurants in Seattle continue to thrive, and I don't understand, with all the money on the east side of Seattle, why a restaurant can't stay open. But it is a quizzical thing that restaurants go out of business. I mean, you faster than you can change your mind. It's astounding to say, hey, let's go back to that place, and then you drive over there, and they're closed. It's like it can't be because of the minimum wage, because they were not affected by that.
Obviously, COVID has a lot to do with that, but I get your point. And if you go back and look pre-COVID, the point that you're making is absolutely solid. Paul, thank you for the call. Alan in West Palm Beach, Florida. Hey, Alan, what's up?
I just found it on the internet here. Rush Limbaugh on bipartisanship, and let me read here. What they mean is we check our core principles at the door, come in, let them run the show, and agree with them. That's bipartisanship to them. To us, bipartisanship is them being forced to agree with us after we politically have cleaned their clocks and beaten them. That's bipartisanship from the Conservative Party, where it's not a matter of them listening to our values and principles. It's a matter of them, after they've beaten us to rope it up situation, where we listen to them and yield to their philosophy. That's their bipartisanship.
This is, when Republicans are in power, it's, hey, F your feelings, and elections have consequences. And when Republicans are out of power, it's, what happened to bipartisanship? Why aren't you willing to compromise? These poor snowflakes. Alan, thank you. That's a great one. William in Champaign, Illinois. Hey, William, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Good afternoon. Long-time listener, actually first-time caller, and really do appreciate your show. I try and tune in every day. So the senator that was on earlier, I have a 3-for-1 for him. Number one, these jobs that people claim are, illegals are coming here to take American jobs, they're not being taken away. They're being given, and they're being given because companies are giving them, and they're not being held accountable to the laws that we have on our books, which is ironic from a law and order build party, right? And then secondly...
Yeah, and if I can speak to that, William, before you continue, just real quickly.
Sure.
The two industries that were the most heavily, among the most heavily unionized industries in the United States, construction and meat packing, prior to '86, prior to Reagan's immigration reform, those two industries are now low-wage industries with no unions and lots of people who are in this country without documentation. And I'm all in favor of comprehensive immigration reform and all these things. Oh, okay. Well, go ahead, William.
That explains.
I mean, that's why Republicans are in favor of this.
There is not a line of quote-unquote Americans in line for these jobs. These companies are doing what they have to do, which is wrong. But they are paying low wages, which is why, south or north of me, we had a poultry plant where a number of Hispanic men living 8 people to an apartment all got COVID. All of them, I don't know whether they were here legally or illegally, but I can tell you if there's 8 people living to an apartment, they're not making enough money to, live high on the hog here in America. Stop hiring and hold these companies accountable, raise the rates so that Americans are paid fairly, and then on top of all of that, have a program where you come to this country or you're an American, you have one ID that allows you to work in the United States, allows you to vote in the United States, and allows you to drive, or allows you to, like your Social Security card, combine those into one card and save even more money.
I would take the driving out of that because each state has their own driving laws, but and regulations. But I'm with you, William. And this is not some racist rant from some right winger. I mean, I'm in favor of a rational immigration policy. I do believe that countries need to have borders essentially to maintain their integrity as individual countries. And I think that the collapse of that ideology or that thought is one of the major crises that the European Union is facing. And but trying to enforce those things by building walls. I mean, that's what East Germany did. Yeah,
absolutely.
It's just
one last quick point I want to make too is that I watch what they say, but I also watch what they do, and I'm following Marjorie Greene quite a bit. More for the fun of it, but interesting that she keeps pushing the gun rights and everybody should have a gun, and I want to bypass the metal detector. When are they going to start letting their supporters show up and carry guns to the RNC? When are they going to let them start showing up to hotels that have Trump's name on them and march in with guns? When are they going to start walking the walk instead of talking the talk? And I think Democrats need to put them on the offensive. Thank you so much for taking my call today.
Sure, William. The big NRA convention 2 years ago, the last time they had a big public convention before they went bankrupt, they didn't allow weapons in the hotel. It was like, really?
It's ridiculous. Thank you so much.
No gun zone. William, thank you. It's great to hear from you, and thank you for calling. 45 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with your calls in just a minute.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Defending America from the weapons of mass deception. Thom Hartmann here with you. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Rich in San Bernardino, California. Hey, Rich, what's on your mind today? Thank you for watching Free Speech TV.
Yeah, Tom, oh gosh, how can I say this? I'm sorry, Tom. I just had a brain F-A-R-T.
It says here corporations are complaining about not getting stimulus money. It's quite all right. It's easy to get distracted when you're on hold for a while, Rich. It says here that you called about corporations complaining about not getting stimulus money. Does that stimulate a brain cell? Apparently not. Okay, Dree in Sacramento. Hey, Dree, what's on your mind? Dree? Wow, that's strange. Okay, I'm going to put Dree on hold. He's on line 7, or she. I just don't know. And I'm going to just double check and make sure that I don't have some incredible latency problem here where people are hearing me a minute and a half after I say something. No, we're 240 microseconds, so it should be good. Let's see here. Terry in Eugene, Oregon. Hey, Terry, what's on your mind today? Thanks for watching us on YouTube.
No problem, Tom. I'm calling from my car, so I do hope you can hear me. Random
Just
question.
fine.
I'm not sure at all. I did not do my research. Is it possible to count the presidential election as a federal act and then make it a federal law that you can always vote for the president because it's a federal act by mail in the states, or does that cross over state rights?
That's a good question. I mean, the 15th Amendment is pretty explicit with regard to preventing people from voting based on race or if they were a former slave, and needs to be used, frankly, in my opinion, more often, because I think that most of the gerrymandering that's going on, which doesn't so much directly affect your right to vote, but also the allocation of voting machines, the opening of voting, polling places and things like that, seems to be done with a heavy emphasis on race, although Republicans would argue that it's not. But I think that we had the motor voter law in 1997. We passed the motor voter law that its preamble. The preamble to the law says voting is a right in the United States, and then in the law itself, in the actual black letter part of the law, which is like now law in the United States, it says voting is a right. You've got the 15th Amendment, which says it's a right that shall not be abridged by state or federal governments. It specifically names both.
Yes, but you have states that are trying to get. I'm sorry. You have states in Georgia. I believe Georgia is one of them that are trying to pass laws now to make it harder, or if not impossible, to vote by mail.
Yes.
So it seems to me if they make
this is happening in 26 states. Oh well, what you're talking about, Terry, is H.R. 1. H.R. 1 would expand the right to vote by mail. It would basically prevent states from passing laws that say that you can't vote by mail without a doctor's permission, or you can't vote by mail without sending a notarized copy of two different pieces of ID, which are actual laws that are being proposed. There's over 200 anti-voting laws now that Republicans have introduced into 26 states just since the election. They see this as their only way back.
It's crazy how the Republicans never want people to vote, ever.
Yeah. Well, they double down on the voting machines. They'll raise the number of voting machines in white suburban areas, but that's it. I mean, I spent most of my life living in the white suburbs, and I never waited more than 15 minutes to vote. Terry, thank you for your call. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. Hey, my new book is out. The Hidden History of American Oligarchy, Reclaiming Our Democracy from the Ruling Class. In this book, I trace the history of the struggle against oligarchy from America's founding to the United States' war with the feudal confederacy, to President Franklin Roosevelt's struggle against economic royalists who wanted to block the New Deal. In each of those cases, the oligarchs lost the battle. But with increasing right-wing control, we're at a crisis point. Want to know more? You can sign up for 3 virtual book events. Powell's virtual event, In Conversation with David Corton, is Tuesday, February 2nd at 5 p.m. Pacific Time. The Seattle Town Hall virtual event is Thursday, February 4th at 6 p.m. Pacific Time. And the Books and Books virtual event, In Conversation with David Corton, is Tuesday, February 9th at 4 p.m. Pacific Time. Come support your local bookstores and hear about my new book on oligarchy. The links are all over at thomhartmann.com. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you and Sam in Palm Springs, California. Hey, Sam, what's up?
Tom, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
I hear you just fine, Sam, but I'm going to put you on hold if you ask me again.
Earlier, you were talking to a young man, I think a Republican, in regards to the immigration problem and employers who are hiring illegally. You have Bernie Sanders here. I know for years I've heard you with him. Why don't we now push that issue since we're having such difficulties in this country? Just this morning, I heard that women are impacted more than any persons in our country with job-wise, and you know that people are losing their jobs left and right at this point in time, and we're taking on people that are coming in and are taking jobs. Why are we not, as the Democratic Party, pushing the issue to stop employers from hiring people who are not citizens or who are not coming in properly?
Well, the law actually never went away. Even the 1986 Reagan's 1986 immigration reform didn't decriminalize employers hiring people who are here without authorization. What happened was Reagan stopped enforcing that law. And ICE has built up this whole giant infrastructure around chasing down brown people and deporting them and running them out of the country. And every president since Reagan, none of them have been willing to take on these big corporations. And I think the reason is very simple. The construction industry, which has gone from being one of the most heavily unionized industries in the United States to not for that reason, it has it's a $1 trillion industry, and they've got, hundreds of millions of dollars for lobbying and to give gifts and contributions to politicians of both parties. The meatpacking industry, ditto. And a number of other industries, particularly parts of the retail and the restaurant industries, same thing. And I think that, frankly,
I don't want to interrupt you, but you keep mentioning those industries. But I'm in California, and those are not the only industries where jobs are being lost to people who are from other areas.
Of course.
For an example, in Southern California alone, you can't find an African American driving a garbage truck. Yet you can find others who cannot even speak English driving a garbage truck. That's
right.
This is something.
And again, that used to be a good union job.
It is impacting African Americans more than it is anyone in the job market.
I agree with you.
In California, stores in California are not hiring African Americans. You walk into any store, almost you find zero African American. They're invisible, but they are visible shoppers, but invisible employees.
Well, Sam, you have to keep in mind that if I could just add one data point here for you, the Hispanic population of California is quite substantial. I don't recall the exact number, but it's north of 20%. It's greater. There are far more Hispanics in California, period. Legal people of Hispanic ancestry legally in California than there are African Americans in California. So that has some effect on it. But you're absolutely right.
Employment discrimination. Employment is
no, I get it. I'm agreeing with you, Sam. I'm agreeing with you. Let me, though, finish my original thought, which is that this is not a matter of legislation. This doesn't require Bernie Sanders or anybody else to pass a law. This requires President Biden to direct ICE to change their focus from chasing down individual people. This is the equivalent of the drug law, the so-called drug war, right? I mean, Nixon really didn't care about the drug lords, as it were. John Ehrlichman came right out and said it. They wanted to criminalize being black or being a hippie, an anti-war hippie, and so they passed these drug laws. They were going after the individuals. ICE has been doing that since Reagan. I mean, they've gone through a couple of reincarnations, but hey, that's their fun thing, is chasing down individuals. Nobody wants to go after rich white people who own businesses, including some Democrats. And so if we're going to lobby for an enforcement of the existing immigration laws on the books, then that lobbying, I think, needs to be directed toward the Biden administration. The danger here, and the reason a lot of Democrats won't touch this topic or don't want to go close to it, is because a number of the Republicans who are talking about this stuff, presumably our guest excluded from that, are doing it simply as a racist dog whistle. I guarantee you, I am not making this position as a racist dog whistle. In fact, as you point out, Sam, it's the exact opposite. This is hurting the last hired folks, the most discriminated people in the country, African Americans by and large, are being hurt more than white people by this. And in fact, you could argue that there's a lot of white people who are benefiting from people being in the country without documentation being able to work.
I agree with you. I agree with you. But I'm saying that.
Yeah. Sam, you trailed out in the middle of your sentence there. But we're hitting the break here. I got to wrap it up. We're going to do a progressive town hall right after this break. The entire next hour is going to be U.S. Congressman Andy Levin of the 9th District of Michigan. He's a member of the the Congressional Progressive Caucus, and he's also on Education, Labor, and House Foreign Affairs. He'll be taking your calls for the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. The Clean Phone Pro, phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. Plexiderm, real science, real results. More info at plexiderm.com, code TOM. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More information at expressvpn.com/Tom. Gabby takes the pain out of insurance shopping. More info at gabby.com/Tom. HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at hellofresh.com, code TOM. And Superbeats, heart chews for heart healthy energy. More info at superbeatsradio.com/Tom.
Our book today is Microtrends Squared by Mark Penn. The first chapter, The Building Blocks of Change Today, The Power of Microtrends. We live in a microtrends world. It's driven by granular, often opposite patterns of human behavior that seem small but punch above their size. We've identified these powerful patterns as microtrends, and the world is full of them. Together they are the dots of a global impressionist painting that comes to life when you step back and look at it holistically. These forces have only become more impactful in recent years, and they've started to upend society. 10 years ago, when I first identified these patterns in change and microtrends, I saw a world of boundless opportunities. I was over-the-top optimistic about how microtrends would produce a new world of personalized products on our shelf, and how in Washington they would produce an even greater selection of fresh, first-rate political choices. Of course, that's not exactly what happened. Instead, the information age has given way to the disinformation age, in which fake information abounds. The nation founded on free speech is grappling with how to live with free speech in the era of the internet troll. The optimism around our economy faded with the unexpected crash of 2008, followed by a historically slow recovery over a decade. Only now is it recovering. Unparalleled consumer choices leading not to the growth of more startups, but to the dominance of just a few internet companies, which are amassing more and more power on the basis of data gleaned from willing but unknowing consumers. And the older generations, who in their own youth, led a rebellion, have now dug in their heels against the politics and culture of today's new generations. What makes the microtrend such a powerful tool in this moment is that it can unpack and explain changes that we're seeing that otherwise make no sense. On the surface, for example, the middle class can seem to be shrinking, and this is alarming.
But it is only by digging deeper and seeing that education is driving more people into the upper classes that we can come to understand these overall statistics at a more molecular level. Often, two diametrically opposed trends are occurring at the same time, which would be invisible in the averages, which leap out when understood as the result of a cauldron of microtrends. Today in politics, for example, there is no overall ideological shift. Instead, one group of moderates became more conservative and another group became more liberal, causing society to become both more liberal and more conservative at the same time, essentially canceling each other out. This increased polarization then produces even more gridlock and confusion. We can see similar tugs and pulls throughout society. While one group seeks more technology, another one wants to sit in the Amtrak quiet car. Some can't sit through a 6-second commercial. Others spend hours and hours binge-watching TV. Some live in a world of globalization, while others yearn for a return to greater nationalism. To explain all this, we've borrowed from Newtonian physics. For every trend, there is a counter-trend. It's human nature in the information age. Every move or desire in one direction seems to inspire a counter-move by another group in the opposite direction. For every radical group, there's a new conservative group. For every new product in mobile technology, there are those sticking to the flip phone. Only by understanding the complexity of these developments can we make sense of a world that seems senseless, confused, and even jumbled. While in 2007, microtrends allowed you to navigate the changes of the day, now microtrends squared lets you better understand the emerging chaos as the seesawing of opposite forces fighting for dominance in the social, political, and cultural worlds. In the last decade, technology was able to exploit and even conquer the world of microtrends with its ability to customize products and our lives based on AI and big data. But even as these attempts have transformed our lifestyles, they've also led to some serious unintended consequences that have further clouded society. Microtrends disentangles many of these shifts and lies at the source of many battles for power that have disrupted our world today. As you'll see throughout this book, those ongoing battles will result in some very unlikely winners, losers, and shifts in the overall power match of society. While the technology behind increased personalization of goods and services has been providing us with more choice in our daily life, we've instead been making fewer choices, burrowing into comfortable silos. We expected that the advances in our ability to customize goods and services would open us all up to a new world of never-ending experimentation. A decade later, exactly the opposite has occurred, and our society has become increasingly polarized, with people finding choices they like and picking them over and over again. In 2007, microtrends explained how the Starbucks economy had succeeded the Ford economy. In the Ford economy, you could have any color you wanted as long as it was black. The aim of industry was to mass produce products at the lowest possible cost, and that meant standardization of goods. But the new economy of the 21st century was moving starkly away from that model, instead providing consumers with any color they wanted. The Starbucks economy was based on creating greater value through customization, even of simple products like coffee and tea. People everywhere became more individualistic in their tastes and were rebelling from carefully mowed lawns and white picket fences. The marketplace responded to these trends by allowing people to have it their own way, and they did. The theory was that more choice would result in a happier and more satisfied group of consumers. Variety would open consumers up to new experiences, in many ways bringing us closer together, allowing us to mix, match, and try out all sorts of new options. Something rather surprising happened, however, as consumers got more choice. The book Microtrends Squared. Book Building the New American Economy.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And this hour, we're going to do a national progressive town hall meeting with Representative Andy Levin. He represents the 9th District of Michigan, member of the House Committee on Education and Labor, also on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Most importantly, the price of admission to this program, he's a member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. His website, Andy Levin, ANDYLEVIN.house.gov, and you can tweet him at Rep. Andy Levin. And Representative Levin, welcome to the program. It's great having you. It's nice meeting you, and thanks for joining us today. Hello? I am not hearing Representative Levin. Sean, are you? He's on hybrid 2.
Oh.
We're not hearing him. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Representative Levin, are you there now? I
Yeah,
can.
you hear me?
There we go.
All right. I hear you and I see you. So there you go.
Great. Okay. It's like a bad Verizon commercial. So first of all, I grew up in Michigan. I remember Senator Levin. Are you related to him? Because I thought he was the 9th District of Michigan as well at one point.
Yes. So Sandy Levin's my dad. Carl Levin's my uncle. My dad served in the House for 36 years, and my uncle for 36 years in the Senate. And those two Jewish boys from Detroit were the longest-serving siblings in the 230-year history of the United States Congress by far. And they're both retired.
That's amazing. Yeah, and they were both really, really good guys. By way of introducing yourself to our audience, let me just toss it to you, who you are, how you got into politics, why you're here. If we can do that in just 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll just pick up phone calls for the rest of the hour. And just let me, inform my listeners, again, if you want to talk to Congressman Andy Levin, Representative Levin, the number is 202-808-9925. So, sir, your introduction.
Well, yeah, so I didn't run for Congress till I was 58 years old. I spent my life doing a lot of other things. I was a union organizer, first and foremost. I organized nursing home workers and other healthcare workers with SEIU for 5 years, and then I was supposed to get a PhD and become a professor of Buddhist philosophy. I got a Mellon Fellowship in the Humanities and took it to the University of Michigan. Went to and I ended up getting a master's degree, but between college, a year in India, and graduate school, I spent quite a bit of time in India, and I was in China, actually, during the Tiananmen Massacre. Got very involved in human rights. I also got involved in Haitian human rights in Haiti when I was organizing with SEIU. Part of the time I was in Boston, not in Michigan, and a plurality of workers in any nursing home in that part of Massachusetts are Haitians. So I learned to speak Haitian Creole, and I got all that's a whole other thing. Then I went to Harvard Law School, where I was the president of the Harvard Labor Law Project and was very involved in refugees, helping refugees seek asylum. Ran the field operation of the campaign of the just dearly departed John Sweeney to be president of the AFL-CIO, and then for 11 years, I was the assistant director of organizing at the AFL-CIO. After that, for 4 years, I ran the workforce system of the state of Michigan with Jennifer Granholm, created a huge program to help un- and underemployed workers go back to school, called No Worker Left Behind, and there's a lot more about that. And then for the 8 years in between my time with the state of Michigan and running for Congress, I created and ran a clean energy finance market in Michigan to help businesses and nonprofits do radical energy makeovers of their buildings. So I'm kind of like basically a lifelong labor guy, lifelong environmental person, clean energy, human rights. That's kind of my background. I'm basically, Tom, I'm somebody whose heroes, I mean, obviously I look up to my dad and uncle and other Adlai Stevenson or any number of FDR, but really my heroes are more Gandhi and FDR and Cesar Chavez and other people who use creative, nonviolent, direct action to garner the forces of the people to demand change in this world, and that's what I believe.
Well, I'm impressed, and I'm pleased and honored to have you on the program. So let's pick up some phone calls, okay?
Absolutely, and the ready to go.
Okay, Kirk in Bremerton, Washington. You are on the air with Representative Andy Levin.
Happy Monday to both of you, and Brother Levin, Representative Levin. It's great to learn of your labor background. I'm a retired UPS driver and a proud Teamster and a member of Teamsters for a Democratic Union. You probably heard of them in Detroit.
Of course.
Last hour, Tom mentioned that Bernie was passing along the news that the CBO has determined that raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour will cost $54 billion a year to the budget. And as a result, that will become able to be passed through reconciliation. I'm thrilled to hear that. I'm also very concerned because we've seen the movie before when Democrats are out of power. They talk really powerfully about changing labor law. And then when we gain power and we have the ability to pass that, they get weak knees. It happened in the blue wave in the mid-2000s with card check. Given your perfectly appropriate background as the family member of senators and congresspeople, how do we avoid that happening this time around? Because changing the minimum wage to $15 an hour will be a sea change in the American economy for people who work for a living.
Thank you, Kirk.
Great. Well, so my brother, first of all, I like that the CBO score says that raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour will have a budgetary impact. However, I passionately disagree with the analysis. So in other words, what they are willing to consider and not consider makes them think it will hurt the budget when I am quite sure it would significantly help the budget, because 27 million American workers would get a raise. 1.3 million Americans kids and adults would be pulled out of poverty. All those increased wages mean higher tax revenue. All those people no longer in poverty mean the less need to spend on social programs. So I'm with Bernie 100% about we are going to keep this in the package. We're fighting super hard. It's a difficult fight. I'm not going to lie to you, but we need to keep it in the package. Now, in terms of your idea about the Democrats talk big when they're out of power and when they're not in power, when I was at the AFL-CIO from 1995 to 2006, the first thing I did was create and run Union Summer. And then there was a period when I organized and helped support multi-union organizing campaigns in San Antonio, Seattle, L.A., different places, Stamford, Connecticut. But the last part, I created and ran the Voice at Work campaign to stand up the Employee Free Choice Act, the exact legislation you're talking about. And 100 years ago, I was the staff attorney for President Clinton's Labor Law Reform Commission. So I have lived and watched the failure of the Carter administration, the Clinton administration, and the Obama administration, the three Democratic presidents of the last 50 years, or 40 years, to get fundamental labor law reform done. And not only do we need to pass the Raise the Wage Act to $15 an hour with no sub-minimums for tipped workers, by the way, who are disproportionately women and women of color in particular, we really need to pass fundamental labor law reform, the PRO Act. And that's my number one legislative priority, and I'm going to fight like hell to do it.
That's great. Congressman Andy Levin is taking your calls for the hour in our National Progressive Town Hall meeting here on the Thom Hartmann Program. He represents the 9th District of Michigan. Levin.house.gov is the website. You can tweet him at Rep. Andy Levin.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So drop onto Twitter and say, hi, Rep. Andy Levin, and we will be back with more of your calls for him in just a moment. And welcome back. Excuse me, Anthony. You're on the air in Detroit, Michigan. You're on the air with Representative Levin.
Hi, Congressman Levin. How's it going? I just wanted to ask. I know you guys are going to be limited in what you can really get done with the filibuster and have to do whatever reconciliation. I don't really understand what that is, but what pieces of the legislative agenda are you looking to get passed that way?
Great question, Anthony. Well, so as I mentioned a minute ago, I really am fighting for the $15 an hour to be included in the in the reconciliation package. And by the way, it's a gradual increase, so small businesses have predictability over several years, so we get every worker in America up to $15 an hour. Senator Elizabeth Warren and I introduced last Congress, and we just reintroduced the Coronavirus Containment Corps Act. The president has said he wants 100,000 more public health workers. I absolutely want this bill in the package. We lost 50,000 public health workers since the Great Recession. This would be a great jobs program. It would put 100,000 people to work. And, Anthony, we need to hire people from each community, reflecting the full diversity of the communities and with the language ability necessary. So, for example, in my district, which is just north of Detroit, we need people who speak Chaldean and Arabic. Well, most people in America might never have heard of Chaldean. It's an Aramaic language that Iraqi Catholics speak. You know, I'm the world center of that outside of Iraq. Well, in some other part of the country, they need Spanish and Vietnamese. So it's really a chance to hire local people to do this work. We need to get more money to the American people. We need to increase and lengthen unemployment insurance. We need money for our local governments, our state governments, our public schools. We need more nutrition assistance for everything from kids to seniors. There's a lot we're hoping to get into this package. The president's marker of $1.9 trillion isn't bad, and we're going to try to – what reconciliation does force us to do, Anthony, is the Senate and the House to really have our act together with each other about what we put in and not to include things that the Senate parliamentarian would strike because they aren't budget related. So we're going to try to thread that needle to make sure we get something that could pass on reconciliation. Now, the filibuster, Tom, you know, we can talk about that. I think we ought to do away with it. And my beloved uncle doesn't agree with me, by the way.
Your who doesn't agree with you?
My Uncle Carl, who's a kind of a traditionalist. You know, he was a senator for a long time. But I think that many of the current senators have the better of the argument. That really, if you really look at the history of it, it's steeped in racism. It's steeped in slavery itself and the desire to keep slavery.
John C. Calhoun.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, and anyway, so I think we ought to do away with the filibuster, but I don't know what the odds are of that with just 50 Democratic senators. At least
it was
two
used
whom have already
exclusively from the. Forgive my interruption, but we're going to hit a break here in a second. From the 1830s, when John C. Calhoun got that into the Senate rules, until after the Civil War, it was used exclusively to block discussion of slavery and abolition on the floor. And from 1865 to 1964, it was used exclusively to fight civil rights legislation. I mean, that should be enough to tell anybody what's going on.
Hello.
Anyhow, Congressman Andy Levin. Congressman Andy Levin is with us. He'll be right back in 1 minute. Stick around. I got to read an ad here on the commercial side. Hey, my new book is out. The Hidden History of American Oligarchy, Reclaiming Our Democracy from the Ruling Class. Want to know more? The links are all over at thomhartmann.com. So what makes Trump supporters Trump supporters? Good question, right? Well, Psychology Today did a deep dive into a whole bunch of literature on this and a number of studies and concluded that there were 5 characteristics that crossed right across virtually all Trump supporters. I do a deep dive on these on our video over at thomhartmann.com for the supporters of our program today. But here's essentially what it says. Number 1, they are authoritarians, by and large authoritarian followers. They want a strong father figure to make them feel safe. Number 2, social dominance orientation. They believe in a caste system and they think they should be in the top caste. Number 3, prejudice. They view people of other races poorly. Number 4, intergroup contact. Most of them have never experienced significant contact with people of another race or people, deeply different than them. And number 5, relative deprivation. They feel like they've been screwed. They're not sure why. And Trump tells them, oh, it's those brown people. It's all over at thomhartmann.com. Representative Andy Levin of the 9th District of Michigan, a member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, is with us on our National Progressive Town Hall meeting. And Abby in La Crosse, Wisconsin, you are on the air with Representative Levin.
Hi, Tom. Hi, Congressman. Every time I hear discussion of the minimum wage, I keep screaming, I want there to be an asterisk on the $15 an hour, because I've lived long enough to see this cycle that we want the minimum wage to be at a certain level, but by the time we get there, so many years have passed that inflation has rendered it practically meaningless. So what I want that asterisk to say is that it's based on 2016 dollars adjusted for inflation. We don't stop raising it until we get to $15 as equivalent to what it was in 2016.
Well, that's a good point, Bobby. I would say that our legislation goes much of the way towards what you want, but not all of the way, because it is indexed for inflation, but it's not indexed back. So it would keep over time. But I think you raise a really good point, and our $15 an hour in 2025 is not going to be the same as $15 an hour in 2016, although inflation is very, very low by historical standards, has been for a couple of years, and if that continued, the difference wouldn't be too extreme. But you raise a really good point.
Ken in Woodbridge, Virginia, you're on the air with Representative Levin.
Yes, sir. Lovely talking to you guys. Appreciate you taking my call. My question was about the minimum minimum hourly wage. Okay, if you're a part-time worker, say like minimum hour wage is $10 an hour. Okay, if you're a part-time worker, you don't get that $10 an hour until you work those 40 hours. So a lot of those employers, they'll work you like 30, 38, 39 hours just so they don't have to pay you full-time wages. And on top of that, because you're not working full-time, they don't give you any benefits. What can be done to ensure that part-time workers have health insurance and the full-time wages along with everybody else having living wages? Thank you. I'll listen.
Well, that's a great point. So there's a couple different strands to it. First of all, I'm a big backer of Medicare for all. I don't think your health insurance should have anything to do with your job. I think it's a basic human right, and every American from cradle to grave should have health insurance, which means your body, mental health, dental, vision, everything. In terms of wages, the Fair Labor Standard Act does cover part-time workers, even very part-time. So if your state has a higher minimum wage than the federal minimum wage, or if you are only subject to the federal minimum wage, either way, you must be paid the minimum wage for every single hour you work. And there's a lot of there's not enough enforcement of that, but that is the law specific to that. Now, the PRO Act that I mentioned earlier, the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, would tackle this problem of the massive number of workers who are misclassified as independent contractors, or for whom the boss tries to get out of being responsible by creating a franchisor arrangement, the joint employer situation. So, for example, McDonald's as a corporation and the franchise you work for are both responsible. We could organize all of McDonald's at once, and McDonald's is responsible for your conditions at each restaurant. That's what would be the case with the PRO Act. So we got to get that done, Tom.
That is great. Tim in Shelby Township, Michigan. We have a minute and a half to the break. You're on the air with Representative Levin.
Okay. Just to let you know, I've attended a number of Democratic events with Representative Levin, and he's a great, proud representative for the progressive wing. Now, what can we do from a national standpoint to change Macomb County back to a blue county?
That is, Tom, Macomb, you probably have even heard of Macomb County. If you see national reporters trying to write about the so-called white working class, Macomb County is the number one place they go. It's almost two-thirds of my district. It's the place where the term Reagan Democrat was coined. And my answer to Tim is, let's not just talk about a laundry list of progressive ideas. We have to implement them. So if we pass $15 an hour, the PRO Act, universal child care and preschool, a tax system that actually makes the rich pay their fair share and doesn't make the working person bear the whole load, fund Social Security into the 21st century and make millionaires and billionaires pay at the same rate as everybody else does. I think if we pass a kitchen table economic agenda like that, it would go a long way towards making Macomb County blue again. The factors Tom talked about and about his book are real, and so some people will never get back, but I really think Macomb County voters just want someone who will help them reach the American dream again.
Congressman Andy Levin is with us for the hour in our National Progressive Town Hall meeting, taking your calls. We'll be back on the other side of this break here at the bottom of the hour. You can tweet him at Rep. Andy Levin, his website, levin.house.gov.
Listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And we will be right back with more of your calls for Congressman Andy Levin. Stick around.
Our book today is Microtrends Squared by Mark Penn. The first chapter, The Building Blocks of Change Today, The Power of Microtrends. We live in a microtrends world. It's driven by granular, often opposite patterns of human behavior that seem small but punch above their size. We've identified these powerful patterns as microtrends, and the world is full of them. Together they are the dots of a global impressionist painting that comes to life when you step back and look at it holistically. These forces have only become more impactful in recent years, and they've started to upend society. 10 years ago, when I first identified these patterns in change and microtrends, I saw a world of boundless opportunities. I was over-the-top optimistic about how microtrends would produce a new world of personalized products on our shelf, and how in Washington they would produce an even greater selection of fresh, first-rate political choices. Of course, that's not exactly what happened. Instead, the information age has given way to the disinformation age, in which fake information abounds. The nation founded on free speech is grappling with how to live with free speech in the era of the internet troll. The optimism around our economy faded with the unexpected crash of 2008, followed by a historically slow recovery over a decade. Only now is it recovering. Unparalleled consumer choice is leading not to the growth of more startups, but to the dominance of just a few internet companies, which are amassing more and more power on the basis of data gleaned from willing but unknowing consumers. And the older generations, who in their own youth, led a rebellion, have now dug in their heels against the politics and culture of today's new generations. What makes the microtrend such a powerful tool in this moment is that it can unpack and explain changes that we're seeing that otherwise make no sense. On the surface, for example, the middle class can seem to be shrinking, and this is alarming. But it is only by digging deeper and seeing that education is driving more people into the upper classes that we can come to understand these overall statistics at a more molecular level. Often, two diametrically opposed trends are occurring at the same time, which would be invisible in the averages, but which leap out when understood as the result of a cauldron of microtrends. Today in politics, for example, there is no overall ideological shift. Instead, one group of moderates became more conservative and another group became more liberal, causing society to become both more liberal and more conservative at the same time, essentially canceling each other out. This increased polarization then produces even more gridlock and confusion. We can see similar tugs and pulls throughout society. While one group seeks more technology, another one wants to sit in the Amtrak quiet car. Some can't sit through a 6-second commercial. Others spend hours and hours binge-watching TV. Some live in a world of globalization, while others yearn for a return to greater nationalism. To explain all this, we've borrowed from Newtonian physics. For every trend, there is a counter-trend. It's human nature in the information age. Every move or desire in one direction seems to inspire a counter-move by another group in the opposite direction. For every radical group, there's a new conservative group. For every new product in mobile technology, there are those sticking to the flip phone. Only by understanding the complexity of these developments can we make sense of a world that seems senseless, confused, and even jumbled. While in 2007, microtrends allowed you to navigate the changes of the day, now Microtrends Squared lets you better understand the emerging chaos as the seesawing of opposite forces fighting for dominance in the social, political, and cultural worlds. In the last decade, technology was able to exploit and even conquer the world of microtrends with its ability to customize products and our lives based on AI and big data. But even as these attempts have transformed our lifestyles, they've also led to some serious unintended consequences that have further clouded society. Microtrends disentangles many of these shifts and lies at the source of many battles for power
that have disrupted our world today. As you'll see throughout this book, those ongoing battles will result in some very unlikely winners, losers, and shifts in the overall power match of society. While the technology behind increased personalization of goods and services has been providing us with more choice in our daily life, we've instead been making fewer choices, burrowing into comfortable silos. We expected that the advances in our ability to customize goods and services would open us all up to a new world of never-ending experimentation. A decade later, exactly the opposite has occurred, and our society has become increasingly polarized, with people finding choices they like and picking them over and over again. In 2007, Microtrends explained how the Starbucks economy had succeeded the Ford economy. In the Ford economy, you could have any color you wanted as long as it was black. The aim of industry was to mass-produce products at the lowest possible cost, and that meant standardization of goods. But the new economy of the 21st century was moving starkly away from that model, instead providing consumers with any color they wanted. The Starbucks economy was based on creating greater value through customization, even of simple products like coffee and tea. People everywhere became more individualistic in their tastes and were rebelling from carefully mowed lawns and white picket fences. The marketplace responded to these trends by allowing people to have it their own way, and they did. The theory was that more choice would result in a happier and more satisfied group of consumers. Variety would open consumers up to new experiences, in many ways bringing us closer together, allowing us to mix, match, and try out all sorts of new options. Something rather surprising happened, however, as consumers got more choice. The book Microtrends Squared. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. Hey, my new book is out. The Hidden History of American Oligarchy, Reclaiming Our Democracy from the Ruling Class. The appetite, weight, and body factor. In this book, I trace the history of the struggle against oligarchy from America's founding to the United States' war with the feudal confederacy to President Franklin Roosevelt's struggle against economic royalists who wanted to block the New Deal. In each of those cases, the oligarchs lost the battle. But with increasing right-wing control, we're at a crisis point. Want to know more? You can sign up for 3 virtual book events. Powell's virtual event, In Conversation with David Corton, is Tuesday, February 2nd at 5 p.m. Pacific Time. The Seattle Town Hall virtual event is Thursday, February 4th at 6 p.m. Pacific Time. And the Books and Books virtual event, In Conversation with David Corton, is Tuesday, February 9th at 4 p.m. Pacific Time. Come support your local bookstores and hear about my new book on oligarchy. The links are all over at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. Representative Andy Levin of Michigan, of the 9th District of Michigan, northern Detroit is on the line with us, taking your calls for the hour. It's our Progressive National Town Hall meeting. He's a member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. And let's pick up your phone calls here. Dave in Inverness, Florida. You are on the air with Representative Levin.
Hello there, Congressman Levin. I'm originally from Toledo, by the way, so we're like neighbors. But anyways, I've been trying to get through the Tom's program here for a while now, and it's regarding the the dismantling of our. And I know they did it here in Florida, and I'm going to tell you a real quick story. I received 14 calls from the Republican. I'm a registered Democrat, urging me to vote by mail. I received 2 applications to vote by mail by those people, and 2 of the calls, by the way, were from Donald Jr. But they called me because I didn't fill out the forms for application for the mail-in votes. I voted. My wife and I both voted in person because I don't trust them. There was a reason why would the Republicans been urging me to vote by mail and then saying it's a hoax to vote by mail. Secondly, they dismantled our mail sorting equipment in Jacksonville, Florida. So I think this is important, enough topic to get, because I don't want them to screw up the next election. So. What do you think we can do about it?
So your issue is the post office, too?
Oh, yeah. I talked to my mail lady. She says everything's delayed by about a week, at least, week to 10 days. Okay.
Thank you, Dave. Congressman?
Well, Dave, those are both great points. In terms of the U.S. Postal Service, I mean, the U.S., the first Postmaster General or Postmaster was Ben Franklin. The Postmaster's right in the Constitution, and we simply don't need the Republican Party trying to underfund the Postal Service. They put ridiculous shackles on them by making them pre-fund retiree health care beyond what any part of the government or private sector does. And now that we have this Postmaster General DeJoy in there trying to dismantle the Postal Service, which, by the way, is almost all union employees, members of the letter carriers and the Postal Workers Union and so forth, which are great unions. So we need to stick up for the post office. However, mail-in balloting worked, and there weren't problems with it on a large scale. So, for example, in Michigan, we had 3.5 million of 5.5 million votes being cast absentee, mostly through the mail, some in drop boxes or voting early at the clerk, at your local clerk. And so, while we need to keep improving it, it's an important right I think everybody should have to be able to vote safely at home during a pandemic, Lord knows. In terms of what you're talking about, basically, the Republican Party before Donald Trump decided that in order for them to win elections, they wanted as few people as possible to vote. They've prevented most people from voting right from the beginning of this republic. All women, men, white men who didn't have property, all people of color, they counted slaves as 3/5 of a person, obviously, and didn't let them vote. So it's been a long struggle to get everybody the right to vote in this country. And right now, the Republicans continue to try to restrict access to the ballot box, and we've got to fight them every step of the way. Our new John Lewis Act would do this in many different ways. And it's it's HR 1, so it's our top priority to stop purges, stop poll taxes, have public financing of campaigns, no more gerrymandering. It would improve our democracy in many different ways. And you're absolutely right that state legislatures in Florida and around the country didn't like the fact that Donald Trump lost by 7 million votes. And so they just want to make it harder for people to vote. That is so anti-democratic with a small d, and we can't let it happen, and we're not going to let it happen.
Andy in Hoosick Falls, New York. You're on the air with Representative Levin.
Hi, Congressman. I'm a union man myself, and it's great to hear from a labor advocate as yourself. And I want to talk about my daughter. She's been first and second grade now. It's been almost exclusively hybrid learning. And she doesn't get lesson plans when she's at home from her teachers. She gets her assignments through these very large educational website companies. And I see this as I'm grateful for it now because we wouldn't have had this 10 years ago. But when this pandemic is over, what I see is the possibility of this as a threat to not only my tax dollars going into the local school system, which is what I prefer, but I also see it as a threat to the education aspect of this as far as the teachers go. We call it in my job dumbing down the craft. You take the technology out of the hands of the people who are working, and they lose the ability, to give decent lesson plans. I don't hear a lot of this topic. What are we going to do in the future about this possible competition with our local school teachers because of what's happened here with this crisis? What's your input on it?
Well, Andy, it's so important, and I got to tell you, I come from ground zero of horrible education policy. In Michigan, parents can send their kids to an online school, like from first grade, no restrictions, and all the tax dollars go to that school with very little quality control, and the outcomes are horrible. I think that this pandemic has shown that kids need in-person schooling, that they need the social education, they need the individualized health, kids with disabilities, English language learners, hungry kids need meals at schools. There's, poor kids need to be able to help to catch up. I mean, there are so many reasons that we need to get back to in-person learning when it's safe to do so. But I agree with you that we have to be very careful to make sure that we are supporting public education in the right way. Here's the way I look at it, Andy. taxpayer dollars should be used for public schools, and what our education policy should be about is offering an excellent public school education to every kid. And it's more expensive to teach English language learners, kids with disabilities, and poor kids. Let's, in terms of the federal government, and I'm on not only the Education and Labor Committee, but now for this Congress on the Early Childhood, Elementary, and Secondary Education subcommittee of that. And I think we need to fully fund IDEAs. We've never done it in the Congress. We're supposed to pay for 40% of the cost of individualized learning programs for kids with disabilities. We hover in the low teens. It's a disgrace. So we need to fully fund that and give schools extra help for kids with who are learning English and poor kids. And our infrastructure program needs to give a big assist to schools to update their buildings and including their HVAC systems, which are not filtering the air or circulating the air adequately to deal with COVID. And we will have future public health crises. Doing all this creates great jobs, mostly union jobs. Let's go have a huge infrastructure program to put Americans back to work. That's how I see it.
Darcel in Leland, North Carolina. Darcel, we have just 1 minute to the break. A quick question, please.
Yes, I was wondering if the representative knew anything about the Senior Community Service Employment Program. I was over-resourced by $1,000 with a family of 3, and I was wondering if you knew about it because I'm looking for opportunities as a senior for work.
I don't know about that, Darcel, so I promise I'll look into it. There's tremendous
Department of Labor.
Yeah, I'll look into it. Say the name of it one more time.
The Senior Community Service Employment Program, and it's under the Department of Labor.
Great. Well, we can look into that, and it sounds like a great program. All I can tell you is that in my community, seniors face a lot of discrimination in trying to find employment. We know that half the people in this country can't deal with a $400 economic crisis. A lot of seniors need to work, and we need to help them do so.
It's 45 minutes past the hour. Representative Andy Levin of Michigan, a member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, is taking your calls for the hour in our National Progressive Town Hall meeting on Third Hour Monday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be back with more of your calls for Congressman Levin in just a moment. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Levin.house.gov is his website. You can tweet him at Rep. Andy Levin. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Pat in Columbia, South Carolina. You're on the air with Representative Levin.
Hello, and thank you. I wanted to ask you, it took McConnell 8 days to run through Supreme Court. And I cannot understand why y'all have to have bipartisan with them in order to run through this COVID project that y'all trying to run through. I don't understand that. Why y'all always trying to have them included in everything y'all do, and they'll walk right over y'all and get what they want. Please explain that to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
Pat, I'm ready to ask you to lead our political efforts. You are so right on. Really, the situation is that McConnell was able to approve judges in the Senate because it wasn't both the House and the Senate, and he controlled the Senate. And then they just went to Trump, and so he just put through all these right-wing judges. Now the Biden administration has pledged to move much faster on judges, and I hope they do, and they fill a lot of judicial slots. In terms of the COVID package, it's not like approving judges because it's passing legislation through both the House and the Senate, and the Senate is tied 50-50 with the vice president being a tiebreaker. And, I mean, in a way, Pat, the most straightforward thing to say is there are several Democrats in the Senate who are quite conservative, and they don't want to vote for everything that we believe in. So then they have to be negotiated with, because this, Senator Schumer, the majority leader, needs every single Democrat to vote for something if it's going to pass without Republican support. I, for one, would like us to be not treat bipartisanship as some kind of deity or some kind of main goal. I do a lot of bipartisan stuff. My watchword is justice, Pat, and I fight for justice. And when Republicans want to fight for justice with me, come on, let's go. And if they don't, get out of the way. That's my view.
Matt in East Jordan, Michigan. 1 minute to the break, Matt. Quick one.
What are we going to do with these militias? The militia shouldn't be just a collection of yahoos with some guns and a bad attitude. We got to have national hearings if we're going to have these militias, and I think we should get rid of them, to define what a militia is, register them, and regulate them. Go ahead.
Thank you, Matt.
Great point, Matt. I think what we need, we have to be careful, I think, about creating new legislation that might, might contain people's civil rights in a way we don't like. However, the budget of the FBI and other law enforcement agencies is way skewed towards international terrorism and away from domestic terrorism. That's what a lot of these militias are doing, and we need to put full resources into stopping them. And as you say, we need a lot of hearings to throw sunshine onto this situation. These people are some kind of mix of white supremacists, anti-Semites, racists, xenophobes, neo-Nazis. Anybody can have their political views, but you can't start getting violent in this country to oppress minorities, and we have to take that on frontally.
Representative Andy Levin taking your calls for the hour in our National Progressive Town Hall meeting. We'll be back with more of your calls for Representative Levin. His website, by the way, Levin, levin.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep. Andy Levin. We'll be back with more of your calls for him in just 1 minute. Stick around. You can find an absolutely fascinating library of my writings, including my daily rants, over at thomhartmann.medium.com. You know, there's so much news coming out of the Trump administration, so much corruption, so many crimes. Oh, now they're letting people kill endangered species. Now they're selling off, the Arctic National Wildlife Preserve refuge to big oil companies. Oh, now they're they're authorizing pesticides that we know cause birth defects and damage to children. It's just, step after step after step, that it's so easy to forget that back in July of 2020, it was reported that Jared Kushner and Mike Pence's nephew, John Pence, created a couple of LLCs, American-Made Media Consultants Corporation, that took $617 million of Trump campaign cash, and nobody knows where it went. I'm telling you, these guys are professional grifters. We need to keep an eye on it. There's a whole rant about it over at thomhartmann.com for supporters of our program. Welcome back. Representative Andy Levin is on the line with us, taking your calls for the hour. And
hey, Tom,
Kathy,
can we break a little news?
Yes. Sure. What's that?
$15 an hour is in the House package.
Baruch Hashem. That's great.
It's in there.
That's great. God bless you guys. So Bernie pulled it off, and I'm so happy to hear that. Okay, Kathy in Madison, Wisconsin, you're on the air with Representative Levin.
Thank you very much. Longtime union here, 1966 member, officer, union co-founder. Just want to ask about the way the law is written, like National Labor Relations Act, Railway Labor Act. Basically, all of the labor laws have provisions that guarantee workers' rights to concerted activities, and yet we see one court ruling, one NLRB ruling after another, constantly eroding that right. And it seems to me that, I would ask you what you think Congress should do to get the law enforced the way it was meant to be.
Kathy, that is a great point, and you are so right. It's a great question. Let me just share my own experience. as I mentioned earlier, I worked at the AFL-CIO when we created the campaign for the Employee Free Choice Act in the aughts, as we say. That's what was voted through the House in the late 2000s and failed in the Senate. In that bill, all we did was three things. You card check to form a union, meaningful penalties when employers violated workers' rights, and first contract arbitration. I want you to know that the law we intend to pass now, the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, goes way, way beyond that. It doesn't have card check. It has snap election. But it has the meaningful penalties, the first contract arbitration, gets rid of right to freeload, or what they call right to work, gets rid of a lot of the 1,000 cuts you're talking about in terms of taking away rights from franchise workers, taking away rights from temps, taking away rights from contracted workers. And it gives secondary boycotting rights back. It allows people to strike without being permanently replaced. It really looks at all the ways that they've taken away rights from workers and says, you know what? Any worker in America should be able to form a union if they darn well please. The boss is not a party to it. They have nothing to say about it. And, Tom, what we're seeing right now in Bessemer, Alabama, shows why we need this. An overwhelmingly African-American workforce is having the first NLRB election ever at an Amazon warehouse. And Amazon is doing everything they can to crush this, down to having forced meetings, which would be banned under the PRO Act. They are putting anti-union messages in the bathroom stalls. They even got the city to change the traffic light outside the facility so organizers can't talk to workers going in and out of the facility. And there was a traffic accident there because of the way they changed the light. I mean, this country has got to let workers form unions again. We're down to 6% of private sector workers having unions. The moment we change that is the moment that poor people and working class people start to get power again in this country, and it's long overdue. So, Kathy, we need you.
Tom in Aurora, Colorado. We're down to about 2 minutes to the end of the show, actually, today. Tom, you're on the air with Representative Levin.
Good morning, Tom. Representative Levin. I was just calling to offer a suggestion to something I keep hearing as a problem. That is, the children are missing school. We know online education is at best second rate. Why don't we just work out a plan to run school year-round for a while, help these kids catch up and get through? That was my suggestion and my offer. And thank you for your stance on labor. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Tom. Well, there's a lot of serious talk about certainly at least having additional summer school this coming summer. I am for any kind of experiment that gives kids more time. I don't think I'm really for full, all the time school, but I do think it'd be fine to have more school. All I'll say is teachers are workers who we don't give enough respect to, and if we want to have a lot more time in class, we need to negotiate that in a fair way with teachers. But we are going to have a huge learning deficit, Tom, from this pandemic, and it's very unequal in its distribution. And so it's just a question of basic justice that we have to help kids catch up who are falling behind because they haven't had their normal educational opportunities.
Representative Levin, thanks so much for being with us today. It's been great meeting you and talking with you. Thank you.
Thank you. What a great show. Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope you can come back. Representative Andy Levin, you can find his website at levin.house.gov. You can tweet him at @RepAndyLevin. And we'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires you. So get out there, get active, tag you're it. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great afternoon. Be good to yourself and the people around you. It's a really important time to hold some kindness as your mission. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. The Clean Phone Pro, phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. Plexiderm, real science, real results. More info at plexiderm.com, code TOM. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More information at expressvpn.com/Tom. Gabby takes the pain out of insurance shopping. More info at gabby.com/Tom. HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at hellofresh.com, code TOM. And Superbeats, heart chews for heart healthy energy. More info at superbeatsradio.com/Tom.
We say fight back!